Okay, good evening, everybody. I will call the meeting to order. And Councillor Cohn, I see that you're participating remotely, so if you could identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, good evening, Pelin Cohn, District 2.
Thank you. And we really couldn't hear that, so if
Maybe volume on our end.
okay, we're going to work on that. A brief note about meeting logistics. Anyone joining remotely, please indicate your name display to be your first and last name. Anyone who speaks to the council at any point in the meeting, we would ask you to state your name and where you live. At any point in the meeting, if you are addressing the council, we ask you to keep your comments or questions to under 3 minutes. And if you're speaking about a specific agenda item, keep your comments germane to the topic. Anyone who wishes to speak must be called on by the mayor. And anyone who speaks out of turn, discusses non-germane topics, or goes on too long will be reminded of the need to conform to those expectations. We'll talk about the consent agenda when we get to it, but are there any changes to the agenda? All right, we'll consider the agenda approved. Next up, we have general business and appearances. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on any topic that is not on tonight's agenda. And as with other sections of the meeting, we will hear from anyone, and we will ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody in the room who'd like to be recognized? Steve.
Steve Whitaker. I've asked some of you, I think the Green Mountain Transit lease needs a lot more scrutiny. I've spoken about that at quite a few meetings. I'd like to see a red line version, and I know that the city doesn't have capacity to keep those stairs and walkways and bike paths clear. That's obvious from the lack of maintenance over time. So those are obligations of the city in that lease that probably ought to be transferred to whoever's maintaining the property around. Similarly, the Red Cross agreement for use of this senior center needs to be more thoroughly deliberated in context of the upcoming Maple plan, which may become a city plan. You can't really afford to sign away your full control of the building that might be needed for more priorities within the Maple plan. I'm going to renew a concern that we're going to run out of time come September to get a growth center application in because of the track we're on or the track we're off. Until I run out of time, I spoke to Gabe Lajeunesse after last night's planning commission meeting that concluded. This was written yesterday. He interpreted from the prior planning commission meeting that the growth center pursuit, obligations, and decisions were all in the hands of city council, with Mike Miller awaiting guidance or slack from ACCD. We simply don't have time for this level of misunderstanding. ACCD will not offer Montpelier a free pass to circumvent the plain language of the statute for a second growth center expansion. The request for necessary city funding to complete the studies, due diligence, engineering, design, master plan development should be made now by the Planning Commission, and I haven't seen them even discuss it. The statutorily compliant capital budget and program must be prepared and adopted before the application goes in. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, this budget cycle is the only time to complete that capital budget and have it approved and adopted. Unless you think you can modify it, run another process, and get another one adopted in the summer, now is the time. And there has been no discussion. We don't have a design yet to put costs on roads, sidewalks, water, sewer, et cetera. So The planning commission members are obligated to read the law and direct Mike Miller's activities, not vice versa. We're having the same problem we had with the homelessness task force, where the assistant city manager sat there and throw a wet blanket on things and put spin on things before the council, the task force, could ever begin to explore possibilities.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have Dave Bellini.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hello everybody. A lot of you don't know me. I'm Dave Bellini. Lived in Montpelier for way over 50 years. Grew up here, went to all the schools. I don't usually chime in on city business, but last year's tax increase imposed a hardship on a lot of people. I basically got a pay cut because of circumstances. Living on a fixed income. I'm not poor, but I didn't like getting a pay cut. And other people have it harder than me, a lot harder than me, living on Social Security. And I want you guys to know that that's a real hardship for some people. Yeah, I mean, I'll get by, but other people are just barely scraping by, and I've talked to them. And it's something that you should be aware of, and you should, sort of put yourself in their shoes. When we hear the city go, oh my gosh, we couldn't possibly cut this or we couldn't possibly cut that. But yet, for the taxpayer, for some taxpayers, it's very difficult. For homeowners, it seems like everything gets piled on us. I don't want to be too negative. This is a great town. I love it. That's why I live here, because of my neighbors. I hope we're going to talk about the budget tonight. I didn't really have a chance to look it over that much, because it came out, this afternoon. But let me just point something out, and I hope I'm not out of order. But I notice under community services.
Dave, if you want, we do have a large presentation on the budget. So if you have.
I'll be quick. I noticed there's like less than 20 employees, but there's 5 directors. I mean, you got a director of parks, you got a director of recreation, you got a program director, you got a senior activity director, you got a CDC, a CJC, et cetera, et cetera. I counted 5 directors. I counted less than 20 employees. I worked for the state for 42 years. Usually directors are in charge of hundreds of employees. I understand it's a city, but at some point, I'd like you guys to give some thought to consolidation of your management, not your line workers, but your managers, your directors. A lot of places have a director of parks and rec, not a director of parks and a director of recs. And I don't mean to pick on them. Heck no, they're probably great people. I don't know them. But things like that, when you're facing a budget, you got to look at the hard stuff. And I hope that you do. And I hope stuff can be done by attrition. And I'd also noticed that your healthcare is wacko. Did I read it went up 22%? I called Bill and said, I think maybe you should consider a hybrid plan where it's sort of like partly self-insured. I've been involved with some of that with the state years back.
Dave,
all right.
3 minutes. Thank you.
Ran the clock out.
Thanks for
Okay.
Shayna Casper.
Hi, my name's Shayna Casper. I live on Kent Street in Montpelier. Use your pronouns. I am a member of the Montpelier Community Fund Board. The Montpelier Community Fund Board was created by the City Council in 2012 to create a rational process by which funding requests are evaluated in the context of the overall budget, with funds allocated based on need and benefit to the community. I moved to Montpelier right as this process was getting started. I remember my first ballot being pages and pages of funding requests to vote on individually, everything from $300 for Green Up Day to really significant funds for hospice and things like that. And Montpelier loves to support our local community. It's like really amazing. And we love to support our local nonprofits. And these expenses just really added up. And because they never got voted down, we want to support them. Everyone votes yes for every item all down the line. And so we wanted to make a process by which people weren't just voting yes unknowingly, but that there was some evaluation and procedure. So that we created this 5-member Montpelier Community Fund Board where the board solicits real grant applications so that we get full grant applications, budgets, where we take into consideration prior funding, the breadth of support, the extent to which these grants benefit Montpelier and the residents and the public good, and we allocate grants. A couple of years ago, we switched the process that we would know before making decisions about how much funds there would be, and so asked for a budget line item from the city, as well as that would give applicants more time. The people were having to apply over a year before they'd be able to receive the funds. Now it's still about an 8-month delay between when they get the application, when they submit the application, and when they would get the check in the mail. And the funding has been level set for the past few years, and the budget right now has that line item being level funded yet again. Having the budget for the Montpelier Community Fund Board be level funded, while there is increasing need, does raise some concerns for the Montpelier Community Fund Board. We've heard from some applicants who have applied for going through the Community Fund Board that they will instead be going to the ballot because it remains an option. They don't have to go through this process. And they could also, we believe that they could go to the November election, even if they don't get, if they're not able to go through this funding process. So as the need continues to grow in Montpelier, having a level funded Montpelier Community Fund Board funding is actually underfunding the need. And we think that this will really backfire if participants continue to ask for more to fit the need of what their organizations require, while they know that they're going to get the same amount or less as more applicants are applying, when instead they could just go to the ballot and be voted up every time.
Thanks,
So
Shana, I don't know if you could hear the beeper, but that was your
oh, great.
3-minute signal.
All right.
But I appreciate your comments and
Thanks.
your service. I don't see anyone else online. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to be recognized? Okay, thank you. We can move to consent agenda. We have 2 items that we're pulling from the consent agenda. One is item D, the lease for the transit center, and one is item H, the facility use agreement for the Red Cross. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of those items?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. You've approved the consent agenda. Why don't we go right to the 2 items we pulled? Item G, the commercial lease for the Green Mountain Transit. Who's prepared to talk about this?
What questions are
Tim, I think you requested it.
Yeah, my questions were, and I think Bill answered one brief for me before, was within the lease, it specifies the city would pay a percentage of the operations for GMTA. And I was just wanting to clarify, is that operations for the space or for their whole operation serving Montpelier? And he clarified that it's for the space. So I think that's important.
It's for the building. And to the point that was raised earlier about snow, that city's also in a condo agreement with Downstreet for that building. And so Downstreet actually contracts with the snow removal people. The city doesn't do it ourselves. So we provide it through that condo agreement. So it's kind of a looped thing. We don't directly send our own people. So we do provide for snow removal, but it's through a contract it's through the condo agreement with Downstreet.
I should also point out, we had a question that was raised from the public about why we're only charging $1 for the rent, and maybe you
Yep.
could address that.
So that building, the transit center portion of that building was built with federal transit dollars. And so it is for public transit services. So we can't charge lease rate for public transit uses. We could lease, if portions of it were leased for some other uses, we could, but we can't charge GMT lease money for transit services.
Okay. Council members, any questions? Steve?
Yeah, I'd ask you to verify that statement that Bill just made. There has been a chronic lack of maintenance, the snow removal for year after year after year. Nobody shovels the stairs coming down from the turnaround onto the bike path. They still don't have the ADA required door opener working on the Taylor Street ramp. So a wheelchair person comes up that ramp and then tries to manually open the door and get caught between the doors. I've watched this happen. And it's true. And the excuse is, oh, they can go around the back and use the other door. It's got a button that works. But the motor is on the door. It's just incompetence that it has not gotten it connected, right? The wires hung there out with the box open for a couple of years. So for years, they didn't keep the bathrooms open according to the lease, and they got a free pass from Fraser. Fraser has sold Montpelierites out, thrown them under the bus in favor of coddling GMT, and it's time to stop. I believe we can charge rent. I'm not sure fair market value, but I believe we can charge rent for that space. We should, and then we can bargain that against rate for regular bus service out to Country Club Road or whatever it is we need to do. But we need to not approve this self-renewing lease. That's another provision that should be stripped out. This thing should not self-renew unless somebody raises the stink about it. You should have it sunset and then have to come together and look at what's working and what's not. But there should be a shower installed in one of those bathrooms. They should possibly renegotiate whether the city staffs that. That's an ideal location. We also promised the Freds that would be a tourist information center. How about that one, Fraser? You know, we didn't put a tourist information center in. The opportunity is there to do that. But again, is the state going to staff it? Is the city going to staff it? Should there be a shower there? Should there be lockers there? You know, airport size, backpack size lockers. We've got an emergency on our hands. We got people dying in our streets or in their tents. You know, you need to get serious about that's a city facility that we own, and y'all have sorely mismanaged it, or you have sorely mismanaged it.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the commercial lease for Green Mountain Transit? Or is there any further discussion?
What's the deal on the access door? I mean, Mr. Whitaker's been bringing this up for like 6 months. Is it working or not? And why is it not?
Sure.
If it's not, and why is he bringing it up? If it's been repaired.
So there is a non-functioning door. There's also a functioning door. Green Mountain Transit has no concerns with the doors. They say there's plenty of access. We have looked at it, and the cost of repair wasn't worth it, given the fact that there was another repair. So if you want to
Yeah, I
spend
haven't
the
been
extra
over there
money,
to look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Is it marked as not working?
I don't know the answer to that.
Anything else on this topic? Any comments or questions? Or a motion?
So the transit center is closed on Saturdays and Sundays. What happens in the building during those days?
It's closed.
It's just closed. Has there ever been any exploration of business development to utilize that building during those days to bring in funds to the city so that we are generating some revenue?
So the building was initially proposed to have a tourist information center there. That the state was going to move their tourist. In fact, they were not a co-signer. They signed an endorsement letter for the initial grants for that project. And that was the plan. And then they were going to be able to sell Vermont products, et cetera, in that location. At that was the plan for several years until it was about ready to be constructed. And then the state at that time, under the then administration and BGS commissioner, decided they did not want to do that. So they pulled out, and so the space was designed without them, but with the idea that maybe something could go in there. We have been in conversations with BGS for over a year about them moving back in, and they keep saying they're planning to do so, but they just changed commissioners, and they have an awful lot of things going on. So the plan is still to try to get them to run that as a tourist information center, in which case that would also expand hours over the weekends. And there would be shared staff. Green Mountain Transit's on board with it. BGS was on board with it, but nobody's. So that's where it's at. I've been prodding them pretty regularly for quite some time.
Appreciate the institutional memory. So, were you starting to say something?
No.
Okay. Okay, folks, is there anything else we need to talk about with regard to this item? And if there isn't, I would appreciate hearing a motion from somebody to approve it.
I will move to approve it.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We've approved item D. Now on to item H, the Red Cross Facility Use Agreement. And Sal, you had some questions about that.
Yeah, a couple of things I couldn't find in the document. I don't see anything about the term of the agreement. Is there a?
I'm just going to turn this
Is
one
there a
over to
date on
Kelly
there?
because she's handled this issue. So
And then I noticed that the sections on fees and utility reimbursement and so on are left blank. I'm just curious about that, and also curious about what other facilities were considered. I imagine that the Red Cross has a list of specifications that we looked at, but I'm just curious what the other facilities were.
Well, so for the term of the agreement, I certainly can look into that and make sure that we do have the final term. I mean, essentially what we're looking to do here is just provide authorization to utilize that building if we should need an emergency temporary shelter that the Red Cross would run. But I understand that you probably will want to know what the term would be for that. I don't know that we have like an explicit sort of 1, 2, 3 year term. But we certainly can make sure that that's part of the agreement if you would like. In terms of the cost for use, we would not be receiving any money to utilize this facility. Red Cross would be setting up the temporary shelter for us in the event of an emergency. And so that would be a service to us. And then in terms of some of the facility use or some of the supplies, those would be based on need and request. So we would have the opportunity to take a look at the request and determine if it would be something that we could do or not. But otherwise, it would be something that the Red Cross would provide.
Okay. And were there other facilities? Were there other facilities?
And so
Look.
we did, consider city facilities, but the Senior Activity Center was the best facility just based on sort of being outside of the floodplain and being a city-owned building. And so that was really the building under consideration with sort of the accessibility challenges and the like. So this was really the site that we looked at.
yeah, just to add to that, I mean, there may be other locations in the city, but none that meet the need that the city owns that provide the shelter space. And, we have received a lot of feedback, certainly in 23 and in other, flood emergency events about having a local shelter for people to go to not have to get to Barrie. And so we reached out to the Red Cross and said, what can we do locally? And they were like, well, what buildings do you have? I mean, Barrie's at the Barrie Odd, and that is a city-owned building. So that quickly came down here because central location out of the floodplain and big enough to handle it.
So the Red Cross had a similar arrangement with the Very Odd last summer, right?
And for years.
Yeah, and how long were they in that building during that disaster? Do you recall?
Oh, I don't know. We could certainly look into that.
I mean, it wasn't
Number of weeks.
number of weeks. I mean, it was, I don't even think it was a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, no, I mean, it certainly might have been a month for
And
sure.
just to
Might have
back
been
to
more
your
than a month.
term question, so in the agreement, there is a notation for the term, so it's not like sort of an explicit timeline. It's on page 4, item 13, and it reads, "The term of this agreement begins on the date of the last signature below and ends 30 days after written notice by either party." So it's
Oh,
kind of an
okay, great,
ongoing
yeah.
thing. It's not kind of a
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Time-bound
I missed that.
item.
I was looking for something like that and I must have missed it. Great, thank you.
So it's open-ended, but either party can get out. Adrian, yeah.
And so I just want to make sure, just for my own knowledge, what the coordination or collaboration was with the commission as they're developing their emergency management plan to ensure that everyone is on the same page. And I don't know if they have plans for an emergency shelter. I haven't read their plans, but just to, have you collaborated with them or?
So that's an excellent question. I think in terms of this specific shelter use agreement, it's something, sort of that's been underway and in the works for a while. And so we haven't collaborated specifically with them, but I imagine that there would be opportunity to work with them should we need to use this facility.
To follow up on that, though, we have collaborated pretty closely with them on the Maple Plan. They've met with our staff a couple of times and gone through it. In fact, John is here and Chief Libby has actually been directly working on their committee with them to help coordinate so that their plans and our plans match. I don't know if there's any discussion about this particular building or not, but there are those here that could answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like this need certainly came up through the public conversations numerous times, pretty much every public meeting, the call for this. I like my perspective on the commission, and John, who's here from the commission as our staff, can get up and correct me if I'm wrong, but this, like, the expectation and hope was the city would work on this, and that, so I'm just really happy to see that moving forward. But this wasn't a project the commission was planning to take on. It was more like, this is something that we're hearing from the community, the city should pursue, and so glad it's happening.
The night of the flood, I had people calling me saying, how do I get over to Barry? It's, and I'm sure other people are familiar with that same experience. I think it's a really good thing that we'll have a location right here in Montpelier. Any other council members? Steve?
Yeah, I wonder why the Elks Club public building, clubhouse building wasn't considered. I mean, that's being used as a shelter during the winter. But it seems like a half-assed way to go about two different plans that are not in sync.
Okay.
And it's not clear that we're not forfeiting our emergency use if signing this agreement allows Red Cross to decide that they take that building. It may preempt dimensions of the Maple Plan that haven't been written yet. So I just think it's not an integrated approach, and it should be. I don't see the house burning that this needs to be signed before the Maple Plan gets discussed and adopted as a city plan.
Well, I will note that as the assistant city manager pointed out, this agreement can be terminated by either party on 30 days notice. So if future changes have to be made, I'm sure we could either renegotiate or terminate it.
Also note that we're having a flood watch as we sit here.
That's the burning house.
Well, I think it also, it's in the opening item, it's upon request and if feasible. So it's not like they just take over the building.
Yeah, I mean, that's how that works in Barrie. The city asks the Red Cross to come in. They don't just commandeer on their own.
Carrie, it looks like you might have something. No? Okay.
No.
Are we set on this? Is it, someone have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Next, we have HMPG priorities. And come on up, hazard mitigation program.
Grant.
Okay.
Prevention grant. That's a mitigation program.
Grant.
Yeah, it would be great to write that out in the agenda so that, I mean, when even city councilors don't know what it stands for, the public isn't gonna know, so. Exactly.
Hazard mitigation prevention grants.
All right. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll start off. I'm Keith Coven from Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, do emergency management planning. We're here to talk about the river program and the hazard mitigation grant program applications.
And do you need to put anything on the screen or are you just going to talk?
Yeah,
All
we're
right.
gonna talk.
Works for me.
Talking, Josh.
Yeah, you can explain the river program. Sure. All right, everyone. My name is Roy Schiff. Actually live in Montpelier, here as a water resource engineer with a company called SLR Consulting. We've been working with a program in Central Vermont and around the state to select flood mitigation projects in communities affected by the July of 23 flooding. The state's receiving on the order of $90 million, and this program is intended to distribute the funding coming into the state and into the most affected communities and identify projects. Over the past couple months, we've been meeting with various groups in Montpelier, the Flood Commission, and developing flood mitigation lists. This is coming from a review of damages, ongoing projects, past reports, current studies, and so on. And so we have a very long list of about, 35 plus projects. However, we've been narrowing this list down closely with planning, public works, and other groups, other city staff to come up with a list that we want to submit to the state, Vermont Emergency Management. And in turn, they will allocate some of that hazard mitigation grant money that's coming into the state. So this is sort of a triage program, if you will, for distributing those funds. So we're really here tonight. We have 5 finalists on the Montpelier list. I should say there's a lot of great projects that are outside of this list, but the goal of this work is to get big infrastructure, flood storage, buyout projects funded through the FEMA money coming into the state. So I don't know with that, I don't know if you want to add a little bit.
Yeah, Josh Brome, Planning Department of the city. On that list in the top 5 there's 2 projects that the city is working on through advanced assistance awards. One is the wastewater treatment facility, protecting that asset and protecting the water sanitary water treatment facility. And so we are working on where we have to furnish an application that is part of the advanced assistance award from FEMA. So we have to produce an application. And so we're working on that with our consultants, D&K and Stantec, to develop those applications. But we're not guaranteed funding. It's all competitive, but because the projects are on the list, that provides a little bit more support from Vermont Emergency Management to award those projects. There are other city projects that are being worked on. One of the top 5 is the culvert projects. Public Works is working with a number of engineering consultants to develop those projects. So the city, again, will be developing those applications and submitting those to Vermont Emergency Management. And it's good that it's on this list in this top 5 because that will provide some extra points when they're scoring those.
So then the last two on that list have, which have really stood out for those floodplain reconnections. We're trying to significantly reduce the flood levels, are the 5 Home Farm Way property, which Roy's team had just already been working on that, and the Bailey Dam. I'm gonna give one more information on.
Okay, so, yeah, for those who don't know, 5 Home Far Way is the property that sits, the former, well, there's been a couple, activities going up there, but Food Works, Two Rivers Farm, it's at the confluence of Stevens. It's a parcel that has the potential, has been talked about for flood storage. And that's really a priority of the state in some of this funding. There's a current project ongoing with Preservation Trust of Vermont. And the city's had involvement in that property, in that project, as well as the neighboring landowners. So that project's under final design right now, and this funding would seek implementation funds to actually recreate flood storage in that area. The last project on the list is the removal of the Bailey Dam. The Vermont River Conservancy is currently designing the removal of the relic dams all along the Winooski and the small Trestle Dam up on the north branch. And Bailey Dam actually elevates the local flood levels. It's not going to eliminate our flood issues, but it's going to drop the local flood level. So the funding is going to be sought to actually deconstruct. That project is under design right now with the River Conservancy.
And to be clear, for people who might not know, the Bailey Dam is the name for the dam over by Shaw's.
Yeah.
And I was online talking to Kasia Ranzo about this just yesterday and today, and she said that this would lower the water level 5 feet. And I said, well, wait a minute, it's not 5 feet deep. How is it lowering the water level 5 feet? And the point is, that's the silt and sand and sediment behind the dam, and removing that amount of sediment is what lowers the level that far.
That's correct. And just to be crystal clear, that 5-foot reduction is under normal flow, right? When that river's full of water, we've been doing some modeling lately. That flood reduction could be a 1/2 foot, 1 foot, or 2 feet. And again, it's when the riverbed will drop. We have some really great old pictures of the dam when there were a clothespin factory on the side, and you can see bedrock. There'd be a small cascade right in there that would hold the water up, but the river would have dropped. And so when the floods come, there's a bit more storage, and that backwater, the water ponded behind that dam in flood actually extends about a mile upstream. So there's a lot of storage in there, even though it's not a lot of depth. It's actually meaningful, and it does drop some of the local flood levels. So, yeah. So I guess in summary, those are the 2 advanced assistance projects, and then the culvert project that DPW is really championing, and then the flood storage project and the dam removal project are the 5 that have bubbled to the top of the list that Montpelier would submit to emergency management. We've had initial conversations. There's certainly interest in each of these projects. We don't know exactly which ones would get accepted. That's really through their internal prioritization mechanism. So there's a little uncertainty in how this will shake out, but we're here before you to seek your approval to submit on these 5 applications.
Has the locations for the culvert expansions been identified?
Yes, there are, there's a couple on Elm Street, North Street, Independence Green. They're all culverts that experience issues with floods from 2023 and I believe in 2024 also. So they're all culverts. They were either undersized, or maybe it's the water jumps at the banks and threatens personal property, condominium units and whatnot. So, yep.
Okay, thanks. Lauren.
Just on the culverts, I was curious. I've heard stories in the past about kind of FEMA requirements about how those are replaced. Just curious also, like we've consistently heard that the FEMA maps are likely under predicting what we're going to see with climate change. Like, are we right sizing them? Do we feel like for the reality of what we're going to see, or are they still going to be potentially undersized given what we are likely to see?
Yeah, I don't know if Kurt's on there, so he might have an opinion, but I believe they are looking at it in terms of like the future storms and what those future flows are going to be, knowing that they're just going to be more intense in the future, so that they are taking that into consideration.
And if we approve this, if we get funded for these projects, it's at a no cost to the city basis.
Yep, that is correct.
The state pays the match for anything.
Yep.
Adrian.
For the drinking water project, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up on this list. The drinking water supply flood mitigation, is that the same project that we applied for the congressional district funding? Is that the same? It's different.
No.
Okay. It just said drinking water supply, so I didn't know if it was different.
The sanitary water protecting that is also referred to in the city as the Dickey Dam project. So in essence, like we're trying to figure out a way to reduce the potential of Dickey Dam from failing, which would then could cause damage to the water system. So.
And the congressional earmark request was for replacing water lines.
Anything else? So,
Are these prioritized by you when you submit them? Or does emergency management?
Emergency management will prioritize. The main analysis they'll do is comparing the BCA's benefit cost analysis of each project. So what is going to basically the biggest return for the money? Obviously, wastewater treatment plants. Anything to do with those usually makes them rise very high on any of those lists because they are so expensive. You know, I mean, it's really realistically, it's the city's most expensive resource. So usually anything with hardening those generally scores very high.
And who does that calculation? Do they do all of that? Or
Yeah,
do we supply?
Vermont Emergency Management will do that.
They make that evaluation on their own.
The BCA will be prepared. They'll review those.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
they presumably publish a scoring.
Scoring matrix.
Yeah.
For that.
Anyone else? What you need from us is a vote to approve this going in.
Yes.
Okay. Well, John Copens.
Yeah, I don't.
Thanks for catching my eye there.
Yeah, sure.
I got an email from you.
John Copans from the Montpelier Commission for Recovery and Resilience. Mostly just want to say that this is a good milestone. This is important. These projects, particularly the Bailey Dam project and the 5 Home Farmway project, along with protecting the wastewater treatment facility. These are really meaningful investments in terms of the community's resilience. The one thing I would add is, as Roy pointed to, there's now a list of 35 projects. We're knocking 5 off that list. That remainder, not all of those are good projects, the remainder, but those are really valuable to us as a community, to us as a commission, as we think about what comes next. And I do think it's important to think about what comes next. Like, we're not getting it done with this list of projects. In a way, we're starting. This is a marathon and not a sprint. And so there are bigger and more ambitious projects that are on that list, and will be enthusiastic about working with you all to figure out how to develop those more ambitious projects that really continue to reduce that flood elevation level for downtown Montpelier. So I guess the last thing I would say is, I do think it's worth providing some kudos to the state of Vermont for creating this river structure and the work that has been done under contract with SLR and Roy Schiff. Like, that development of projects, the community engagement they've done, the work with the commission and other partners is really helpful. And I think it was a really smart investment on the state of Vermont's part to invest in this river program that brings us this list of projects tonight. So thanks.
Thanks, John. Anything else? Someone ready to make a motion?
I will move to approve the list as submitted.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Thanks
Thank you for your
thanks
time.
bringing this to us. All right. Next up, we have the budget presentation for fiscal 2026 budget. I think it'll take a little time to set up the technology because there's going to be a slideshow while that's going on. I'll just set this up a little bit. This is the first meeting at which we're getting to hear a presentation on the proposed budget. As all of us here in the room and the members of the public have heard, this is going to be an extremely difficult budget year, which means that a full opportunity to review the budget and to engage the community is more important than ever. At our last meeting on November 20th, we had a presentation on the capital plan, and we had an executive session to discuss the budget implications of potential personnel actions. These are some of the elements that
How? Oh.
Are we working now? Thank you, Evelyn. These are some of the elements that have gone into the proposed budget. We're not asking members to make any decisions tonight, but we're hoping to give everyone an overview, chance to ask questions, seek additional information, etc. We will continue to discuss the budget at our meetings on December 18th, January 8th, January 15th, and January 22nd. So we'll be able to finalize the ballot by January 23rd. The meetings on January 15th and 22nd are designated public hearings, but we will, of course, take public input at all of these meetings. I encourage everyone to listen to what's presented tonight, to read the city manager's budget letter, to go online and review the budget book, and come back with any questions and suggestions you might have. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Bill.
I don't know if you want to get the lights or not.
Yeah, that's
probably a good idea. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It is, despite the challenge, it is an honor to present the budget to you and to represent our staff and the community and to work for you. As per the budget schedule that you all adopted in October, this is the night of the presentation of the budget. The actual deliberations start next week and through into January. Obviously, we can take on whatever considerations remind you. We did provide you updates in October and November of preliminary conditions where we're at. So this is now we're here. Before I launch into the actual presentation, which is longer than usual, I thought it would be really helpful for you and for the community to get a larger perspective. I just say that we've already had, two comments tonight, which really, I think, summarize the challenge that we have. We heard one person say, last year's tax rate is killing us and people are really hurting and it's affecting, my income. And we heard someone else say the needs are much greater than the amount of funding that you have. And, you're basically insufficiently funding a resource that the community needs. And that's exactly this tight spot that we find ourselves in this year for everything that we're trying to accomplish as a city and certainly for delivering city operations. And, there's no perfect answer. We've tried to, as staff, to do the best we can to be responsible for the goals that you set, but also to be responsible to deliver the services that we can. So I want to walk you through this. We start the budget every year we have some basic budget goals, which you help us set. And this year it is, as always, to implement our strategic plan priorities that you worked on diligently through the early part of the year. You were very clear about the need to increase the investment in the capital plan. And in November, you sort of adopted the schedule that had come out of the committee. And you were very clear about prioritizing public safety and public works and infrastructure. So police, fire, public works, those types of services. And then, as always, to keep the tax rate as low as possible. So those were our operating sort of marching orders, parameters going into this. I'm not going to read all of these, but for those not familiar, we have a strategic plan. And there were five basic categories with a lot of services and specific projects, prioritize strategies, and then a number of activities after that. And it's all available online. All of the rest of the presentation, or most of the rest of the presentation, is organized around those goals. So we will come back to them many times. So why is this year so bad? Why is it so, I've been here, this is my 30th budget that I've presented to the city of Montpelier, and this is by far the most challenging one that we've had. And I think if you look at it, first of all, we're coming out of COVID, we're coming out of floods, and we had a lot of backlog of things. And this is a list of things. This is not news to the council. You've seen all this before, but all of that added up to a bunch of demands on our budget that just to do what we had been doing previously, including all the things we stripped out of last year's budget, thinking we were doing that one time to get through, a tough time, would have required a 24% property tax increase. So that was our starting point. And obviously that is not acceptable to anybody. But that was the challenge. There were some other issues too, though. Parking revenues in serious decline. Now, I'm talking mostly about the general fund here tonight, but our parking revenue, we shift. Some people are allocated amongst funds. They work some in parking, they work some in general fund, they work some in the water fund, et cetera. So our ability to have people funded by the parking fund was challenged. So they had to be moved back into the general fund. We are going to have a conversation about the parking budget at some point during this process or afterward, because it's just a serious situation. But more on that later. Delayed inflation effect. Now, what does that mean? We all know that there's been, we went through a period of huge inflation in our country and in our region, and now that is tapering off. But when we're doing budgets, we're 18 months out. So what happens is we're budgeting for what we know to be what the situation now, and then the inflation hits, and then we're playing catch up afterward because those cost increases that happened in the interim don't hit for another budget or so. So we're still seeing that after effect of those cost increases that came through a couple of years ago that are in all of our, that perhaps we didn't budget enough for previously because we hadn't anticipated the inflation. Last year, we had a very large school increase, and therefore the overall tax increase for residents was really high. We already heard about that tonight. People are still feeling that. And similarly, we just had a reappraisal, which shifted a lot of burden onto residents. So not only did they get a high tax increase, but their share of the tax went up. So definitely a pressure point for people that live here. Unlike a business, I saw a comment that somebody wrote on, I think it was Front Porch Forum, saying, when a business doesn't have money, they have to make cuts. And that's true. But usually when a business doesn't have money, it's because their demands have gone down. They're not selling their product. They're not moving things. They don't need as many people to do what they do. In our case, almost all of our service demands are equal or up above what they have been. So we're not, as we heard earlier with regard to the community fund. So there's no less work. If anything, there's more work, but we have this challenging financial situation. And then we have a large number of projects going on, including our flood recovery projects. So trying to make sure we can deliver those goods. We just heard about some, and those are important, and we need to be able to pursue those. So those are all sort of anecdotal reasons why the budget was so challenging to go with the numerical reasons you saw right just before. So what's the budget proposal? Our expenses overall are up 7.5%, just about. Our revenues are also up by 7.5%. So the taxes needed would be about 5.8%. Now, if you look at that and break it down, we've managed to keep our overall operating expense to 3.6%, which is about the current 3.5% inflation rate. And then we are including the capital increase that the council's talked about for another 2%. So I know, we all know that 5.8% is not a number that any of us aspired to, but that is where we've ended up for now, and we will talk about that, and we will work with you if you want to make other decisions. In addition to that, our ballot items, and we have proposed moving the community fund to the ballot. One of the items on our list was just to cut it out. And it was, considering the slashing we were making to essential services, that seemed like something that was at least needed to be on the table. But we also recognized a huge need in the community for those agencies that do important work that are our partners. And so we're recommending that it be placed on the ballot and let the voters decide if they want to fund that as one whole sum of money, not as individual ballots. So if all of those are on the ballot and they all pass, the total tax rate would be 6.94%. For reference, last year was 4.9%. So if you look at that, plus the 2% for capital, that's about where we are. Right now, the water sewer rates are projected at 3.5% plus the 1% infrastructure surcharge. Again, we will be discussing those budgets and rates as we go along. This chart, this whole presentation, by the way, has been printed and is in your budget book. So you will have this. I'm just giving you this chart, and it's hard to read on the screen. It's just showing how the tax rate was calculated and what it looks like over the years. So that's something you can look at. And similarly, you can see the history of the sources of revenue for the city. One of the challenges this year, of course, is our grand list did drop from last year, in part largely because of the appeals that were granted through the Board of Civil Authority process. So instead of having a growing grand list this year, we've got a decline. So that creates an even more stress. Graphically, this is just how our revenues, this is what pays for the general fund. Again, about 2/3 property taxes. Again, don't need to go through all of these, but as you look at our budget comparisons over the last few years, you can see the areas, and you can see that this year the major increases are in capital and equipment, which is what we had hoped, and in police and those areas where we had hoped them to be. And there are certainly decreases or small increases in some of the other areas. Just really taking a big picture, this is how the proposed budget plays out. So public safety, about 40%, infrastructure, and that includes the DPW operations, 35%, and then the other remaining items in the budget for the last 25. So 75% of our budget proposing to go to public safety and infrastructure. We have two proposed bonds, or potential bonds. One, we did review with you the potential up to $2.6 million for a ladder truck. The ladder truck we have is closing in on 28 years. It is in dire need of repair and replacement, and it's about a 3-year lead time to get a new one ordered. So the theory is that we would, and you can lock in a price if we bond it and lock in a price now. We can do that, and we could, if we are, this is a detailed discussion, but we can get that price down if the council's willing to go sole source with the local vendor, probably get it down about $2 million. But we need to put this bond item, and that is included in the capital plan. It was reviewed with the committee. And then we have talked about the development agreement for housing. And that will be discussed probably more next meeting if we decide to go forward with that. Those are the only two bonds that we'd be suggesting this year. So one of the things that's important to understand is, in addition to these numbers and staff and work, is what is already on the plate. What is all this funding? And again, this is so arranged by our strategic plan goals. You can see these lists of projects that we are doing and your staff is doing and that you all have supported and we've moved forward and that are happening. So this is the infrastructure goal, looking at the housing goal. These are the types of things that we are doing. And looking at the rebuild and resiliency goal, we just heard about some of those projects. We've got a bunch of FEMA projects, which are very complicated and personnel require a lot of work on our end. The net zero plan, of course, and others. And you can see on theirs, including the Montpelier Commission on Recovery and Resilience recommendations as they come forward with projects. Advance the economy goal, which is a bit of a blend of economic development and also dealing with people in need. So it's a little combination of both. And a lot of our economic development is based on, making us an outdoor destination. So we see a lot of things dealing with that. And of course, dealing with what the future of the 55 Berry Street Rec Center. Finally, our public health and safety goal, a lot happening there, including implementing the Maple plan. We mentioned the fire tower replacement, ambulance replacement. All these things are things that are very time consuming and things ongoing. And we don't really have a goal, but we certainly consider maintaining a responsible and engaged government an important value of ours. So I kind of usually included as the informal sixth goal. And again, this is a lot of internal work, a lot of things that need to happen to keep us running and doing well and being able to deliver the best government for you, the council, and for the community. So these are type of operational projects. So all that work is happening. These are the things that are going on. I think sometimes, people that look at us don't really think about all that's happening. And it's happening at all of these facilities. Now, some of you have seen this list, but I think it's good to remind us, these are all the properties. So everything in black is our buildings. Everything in green is managed by Public Works, the 2 parking facilities, all the parks and rec facilities, and then the cemetery facilities. But these are the kind of facilities that we are managing and that we are working with. And it's easy to look at this and just see, sort of water and sewer mains and roads as a list, but those translate to 52, to this list here. And this list, is what we have. This is what needs to be taken care of. It's what we are putting in money for paving for. It is what we deal with water main breaks. It's all the things that we have to maintain and take care of and work on. So when we talk about service demands, our police calls are up over 11%, and it's 4th straight year of increase. Our dispatch calls are up 6%, also their 4th straight year of increase. Fire and EMS calls are only up about 2% this year, but they were up 11.5% last year. So a lot of steady work going on with all these. And then, I just went through that list of our facilities with the highways. Those don't change. So regardless of how many people we staff or regardless of how much money we put to it, we still have the same weather and the same miles of road and the same number of pipes, and all those things need to be dealt with. It's still going to snow. It's not, it's still going to sleet. It's still going to do all those things. As we increase our capital funding, which we definitely need to do, it also results in more DPW projects to do. And as we, $50 million comes through this building that our finance department handles. That's including the school revenues that we pass on to them, but we have to manage and account for it, grants, all the FEMA projects, everything that we are doing is being handled by our small finance department. Our planning department handles 300 permits a year, plus the master plan and the various housing projects they're working on. So everyone has a very high demand for work. Our recreation programs are up 8%, even after eliminating after school. So we took out a program and still increased rec participation. Our senior center membership for the first time in a long time has started to grow, and the participation is up after periods of decline. And parks don't really have a way of measuring, but they report very steady use, and the Enchanted Forest sold out 1,000 tickets in less than a day, which was sort of a record sellout. So by all indications, parks demand is up. So we've got work to do. People, our residents and visitors are all using our facilities, all taking advantages, and we are delivering our services. In order for this budget to happen, or at least as part of our recommendation, there's some specific actions the council's going to need to take to make the budget numbers hit. One is we're proposing to increase the downtown improvement district tax rate from 5.15 cents to 7.6 cents. What that does is then makes all Montpelier Alive activities, events, fully funded by the downtown improvement district tax, so that the downtown funds are paying for that downtown organization 100%. Additionally, we have to increase the ambulance contract rate from $50. This is for our neighboring towns, from $50 to $60 per capita. We saved you having to make a decision on that. We've already sent out those contracts to the towns at the higher rate, and they're agreeing to them. We also do not have a no transport ambulance fee. So what that means is an ambulance gets called to a scene, someone receives medical treatment, but is not transported. Right now, we do not have a fee in place. Other places do. We'll be proposing, and the chief will be bringing you a proposal for that. We've counted on you approving that and putting that revenue in the budget. Similarly, our ambulance fees, which are paid by non-residents, but also residents, are lower than most of our regional towns. And so we're proposing to have them match the region. And if we continue the same level of calls that we get, it should bring in about another $100,000. We currently have a sprinkler tax credit, 10% tax credit for all buildings with sprinklers. Commercial buildings are required to have sprinklers anyway by law. So we've been giving that, providing a tax credit for buildings that are mandated to have that. So we're proposing that we keep the tax credit for buildings that have voluntarily put in sprinklers, but remove it for those that are mandated to have sprinklers. That is a $71,000 benefit. And lastly, moving the community fund appropriation out of the budget to the ballot. So those are things that we came up with that could make this more palatable, but they're not easy decisions, and they are things that would have to happen for this budget to balance out the way it's been proposed. So what's already been cut or changed? So you just saw that list of revenue items and those changes I just discussed. So there's that. We are proposing this. We are expecting to see slight increases in local options tax and payment in lieu of taxes based on history. But those are things that are changing. But here's the list of things we've pulled out. Some of these we did last year, but they continue. So there's 0 for economic development funding, 0 for the Housing Trust Fund, 0 for the Montpelier Energy Advisory Committee. We've zeroed out the Green Mountain Transit MyRide. We reduced the community fund ask from the 166 that you heard Shana Casper mention down to the 134. We had tentatively put in $50,000 for Country Club Road funding to build into the budget, and we've zeroed that out, assuming that if we have a need, we can take it from one-time reserves. Legislative advocacy, we had in for $15,000. We did leave $5,000 so we could maintain a level of advocacy, but we cut $10,000. There was a request for $104,000 for homelessness support. We cut $54,000 out of that and used the other $50,000, which will come up later, to provide mental health outreach to assist people in need. We zeroed out the community arts program, economic social justice program, tree board, conservation commission, advertising that used to be the bridge and those kinds of things, but we had thought about using it for other communications, but we took that out. We've cut out the AmeriCorps and Montpelier Youth Conservation Commission. Again, we cut it last year. They managed to raise funds for it. We would hope to restore it this year. We cut it out. Last year, we cut a DPW position. We were not able to restore it. And we cut a rec position last year. We were not able to restore it. So those are all decisions that were made early on. Just scrape everything out that is not really essential. So moving on, the mental health clinician, the social worker, state is no longer going to fund that. So we removed that, our share of fundings. We had some operational cuts in different operations. If you total all things up, including our software. So if you notice the budget software that we use is called ClearGov. All of the budget documents that you have is being done in ClearGov. We are moving into changing our strategic planning software from Envisio to ClearPlans, which is the same company as ClearGov, and creates a direct link between strategic plan spending and our budget. It certainly gives us much better accountability and public transparency, but that's being taken out. Zen City is what we do our budget surveys. There's whole project pages. Again, a really huge asset to us for transparency. We're taking that out. We reduced $5,000 for legal, $10,000 for tree management, rec operations, senior center operations, and another miscellaneous. So you can see operational reductions of almost $450,000. We had initially hoped to increase the CIP to $350,000. After talking with the committee, we agreed that 260,000, 2 cents essentially on the tax rate for a number of years would work. So that was 90,000. Cemetery had an additional $85,000 request for a CIP request, and that was removed. The remaining cemetery budget was left as proposed by the commissioners. And then this year we've removed another Parks and Rec position, so we will be consolidating operations for summer maintenance between Parks and Rec. We've removed an Montpelier Senior Activity Center position, two finance positions actually, and an assessor's assistant. So those are 5 individuals, all whom are presently working for us, who will not be working for us after June 30. So those are total reductions there to bringing us down to where we get. So what's left in the budget? That's hard to say. I put a list here. I came across a note I'd written in 2019 where I'd actually gone to a training and it was, trying to take a big look at your organization and where you were deficient. And that was what I wrote in 2019 of areas that I felt we were deficient as an organization that we needed to improve. And we, for the most part, we have addressed for almost all of them, the data performance piece. I think we could do better, but so we've tried to integrate those in, and a lot of that work and resources get focused on those areas as, couldn't we cut those? So we can perhaps, but they were deficient, and I think we've addressed them. So general fund categories, this is just, again, more budget before I go back to more stories. As you can see, about 56% of our budget is personnel. About 24% is our operating expenses, all the things that we need to operate, salt, sand, fuel, everything like that. And then our capital plan is 11%. And that's really the bulk of it. This is just the numerical version of that chart. But again, you can kind of see very clearly that the capital plan, including debt, is up 7.6%. The equipment plan's up 23%, whereas our community and other sort of community services types is down 30%. So that's really showing very drastically how we focused on the things that you asked us to focus on. Taking a look at the budget, this is hard to read, but it's hard to see on the screen, excuse me. It is in your sheet, and it usually is in the annual budget. But if this budget were passed as is, the average tax bill would be $3,700 approximately, or an increase of about $240. And you can see each slice of the pie represents how much people would be paying for each particular service. And that does net out if there are specific revenues associated with the service. So, taking out ambulance revenues from the fire department, and then general revenues are prorated amongst all the budgets. Capital plan, this is showing basically our proposed $160,000 increase annually for the next 5 years. This sort of jagged line at the top in yellow is the total amount of funding in the plan. The bar graphs are the annual dollars, what I call annual dollars, what we would actually fund for equipment, roads, and things. And then the blue bars are the debt payments. So you can see as our debt is dropping and our total budget is increasing over the next few years, we'll be able to add a lot of annual money. And then the other sort of blue line going through is the equipment. Again, something you kind of have to look at, but I think quickly it shows that we are planning to increase the funds steadily over the next 5 years. And if we don't take on a lot of new debt, then we will have a lot of annual funding available to us. So people talk a lot about employees, and the city employees are the people that do all the work I just described for you. And this budget is down a net of 2.17 employees. Last year's budget was down a net of 5.25 employees. So it's a 6% net staff reduction since FY24. So, you know, when people say we don't cut staff, it's actually just not true. And it has a huge impact. This is just showing the employees by their individual function, just cutting it a little different. This showing who's paid for by the funds. And you can see, so a fair amount of our employees or FTE shares are paid by other funds than the property taxes, water, wastewater, et cetera. So, you know, taxes aren't paying all of the employee costs. And then this is just by department, just breaking them down by department. Again, you'll have all these, so you can look at them as you see fit. So, looking back at the budget, at what's in the budget in terms of our goals, we have the FEMA projects. We have 2.66 million in the capital plan. That's that increase. That includes an increase in paving up to 725,000. Includes $700,000 in water line improvements, and then all the major projects that I already described. Create more housing. We've continued having our staff to move these projects forward, particularly the CCR Country Club Road project, but also any other development agreements type things. We do not have funding for the Housing Trust Fund, and we do not have direct Country Club Road funding. So those are things that on that goal that are not included. In our rebuild resiliency, practice good environmental stewardship, we've maintained funding for the Sustainability Facilities Coordinator. We're keeping the wastewater project moving forward in our CSO projects. We do not have funding for all those things that are listed in red.
And CSO is?
Combined sewer overflow. Thank you. Yes. So those are combined sewers, water and stormwater, excuse me, wastewater, sewer and storm sewers that are combined, that when we have flooding events overflow into the river, therefore putting raw sewage into the river. And we are trying to separate those or create safeguards so that doesn't happen. And it's been a very long standing project. Most old cities in New England are dealing with this problem because they were built years ago and everyone just put it into one sewer. And now, particularly with the amount of storm that we're seeing, not only is it not safe environmentally, but it creates backup in capacity because, you know, that's those storm lines are sharing space with sewer. Moving on to advanced recovery, basically we're keeping Montpelier Alive funded through the DID. Nothing else is really in there. Moving public health and safety, we're keeping the crisis intervention team program going. We are restoring the police officer position that we cut last year. Even though we are in cutback mode, given activity in the community, given the community needs and the increase in demand, we felt it was a very high priority to put the 17th police officer back in place. And we're also putting in the 50,000 for the mental health outreach, would be with Washington County Mental Health. That would essentially be replacing the social worker that is being cut by the state. As you can see, that program is eliminated. Senior center appropriation is cut. Basically now the general fund appropriation for the senior center funds the director, and that's it. Everything else has to be raised through their fundraising or through their program revenues. Reductions in staff, rec staffing. So we cut one last year and we're cutting another one this year. As we said, we're consolidating with parks, which means parks will have service reductions because they will be, some of their employees will be doing rec functions during the summer. So both areas will see service reductions. And again, with our responsible and engaged employment, we are keeping our communications function, our human resources function, and an outside lobbyist, but we're combining work that was done by almost 5 FTE into 3, saving a net 45,000. And we are eliminating basically our efficiency and transparency platforms. So what are the budget positives, right? This is tough, but there are some good things in here. It fully funds DPW and fire at FY25 levels. It adds the police officer back, bringing them back to FY24. It adds mental health funding. It funds the capital plan as designed, and it continues the council priorities for unhoused services, creating housing sustainability, and it's keeping basic services for residents. We can't say that everything will be exactly as it was, but there's no service being removed. Budget negatives, obviously a tax rate increase of 5.9% or 6.9%, depending how you want to cut it, is not a positive. Rex Park and Senior Center are stretched extremely thin and will need to revise expectations for services. DPW is still down a position cut from last year. Our admin consolidations that we talked about will certainly have an impact on our required work. I think also it's worth noting that those FY25 cuts that we took last year are really now kind of baked in. They're permanent cuts, right? I mean, it will take some time and incremental to put those kind of things which funded, I think, some pretty high priorities. And there's a reduction in public transparency through the loss of the software. And I think 5 people are going to lose their jobs as of June 30. So yes, those are all negatives. So I asked this question: how many players on a basketball team? This was a less formal thing, and we would have a discussion, but generally it's 12. And why are there 12? You have your starting 5, you have a backup 5, and then you have 2 other players. And, you know, at least when I played basketball, you had a center, 2 forwards, and 2 guards. I think now they call them all different things, but that was the basic structure. So you have those, and then you have a backup with that same center, 2 forwards, 2 guards, and then you have 2 additional reserve, one who's probably a forward and a center, and the other one's probably a guard and a forward. So you got your 3 deep in every position. You can cover, you can play a full game. If people get tired, if they get injured, if they get in foul trouble, you're covered. You can play with 10 for sure. You still got 2 full teams. You know, you got backups everywhere. You're fine. Shouldn't be any real problem. People get winded. A lot of teams only play 7 or 8 players in the course of a game. And so they've got their starting 5 and maybe a guard center, a guard forward and a forward guard and one other player that come in. But, you know, if you only have 7 players on your team and someone gets in foul trouble, someone gets tired, or someone gets hurt, you're really starting to cut it. And then you get to 5. So you can play a basketball game with 5 people, but people aren't necessarily going to be their best at the end because they're not getting a break. If they're in foul trouble, they either have to play really carefully, and means maybe not probably playing any defense, or they foul out and you're really in trouble. If someone gets hurt, you're really in trouble. And I mentioned that, and then if you don't have 5, you don't have a team. So you either have to not field the team, or you have to play a different game, like maybe 3-on-3 or something like that, but you're not playing the same game that you were playing before. And I mention this because we are probably playing it with 7 players right now with the whole city. And I would say our Rex, seniors, and parks are playing with 5, if that, as long as nobody gets hurt or we have vacancies, whatever. So we are playing with a really thin bench. And I know And if we want to continue playing at a decent level and we want to continue playing well, as we have been doing, we've got to nurture that team. So I mention this because it's just illustrative of there comes a point where you can't do what you're going to do, or you can't play the same game. You can't do the same service. And I think that's, I'm telling you as your professional manager or someone who's been here for 30 years, that's where we're at. So can we reduce the tax rate further? Of course we can, but it's going to require policy and priority direction from you. We got as far as we can go without making value judgments as far as what are higher priorities amongst the competing needs. I can't sit here and professionally say to you that we can do everything on your list, all those projects, all those things, with anything less than what we proposed. So what could we do? We could consider a local options tax sales tax. We obviously can't count on that for this budget because it would be a March election, but maybe you could, if it passed, we could consider reducing the tax rate in June when we set it. We could reduce the capital plan increase. Nobody wants to do that. We could reduce the operating effectiveness by taking out key operations positions. We could change priorities like environmental stewardship or housing and say those aren't as important and we don't need to fund those or the people that support those. We had said don't touch public safety or public works, but we could look at those. Or we could severely diminish or eliminate parks, rec, and senior services. Any of those that are in the red would require additional layoffs and additional cuts to personnel. So, you know, as you are the policy and priority making group of the city, you've got to, we're happy to work with you. We're not trying to say we won't do it. You know, I've certainly given you some informal suggestions of places, but it would require you saying, yeah, we've changed our priority about that. So what are longer term strategies? Certainly health insurance has been a killer. It's been a killer for a long time, but this year really brought it home. And, you know, I look around and I see that municipal governments across the state are all struggling with the same question. They're all in the same budget numbers that we are right now. 7 to 10% people are dealing with. Dave Bellini mentioned, you know, using you know, setting up different risk, and that is something that we're looking at. But absolutely, that's one we have to do. Consider departmental consolidations. Like I said, certainly have been making moves in that way, but continue doing that and looking at fees and rates. Obviously, we hit that really hard this year already, and there's, you know, only so much you can get from a building permit or a zoning permit. But if there's anything that we can do, we should be competitive. We don't want to discourage people from doing work here, but we certainly should be reflecting some of our costs of doing the job. And happy to entertain more longer term strategies. We are laying out a longer term budget that you will see probably later this year for our own planning to try to get a better handle on this. So budget information, the budget books have been distributed and posted. You've got them now, and there's a lot in there. Department budget videos are being completed. Some are done and already posted. Others, they'll all be done by the end of the week and posted. So you'll have the week to look at them. And we did have the survey that residents took that closed yesterday. And so the results have been printed and are on your desks for that. So that's all additional information that's available. Oops, pressed the wrong direction. So I'll end where the mayor started. This is the schedule that you all adopted. Tonight is the initial presentation. Next week, we have a council workshop. The following week, first week after the holidays, we have another council workshop. And then we have 2 public hearings, which of course you could still make changes and have deliberations at, but we would at least hold a public hearing on where we were at. You've got the deadline for warning the budget is on January 23rd. And then, of course, the voters would consider it on town meeting day. So that is my long-winded presentation. which kind of talked through everything that's on our plate. So certainly happy to answer any general questions or specific questions that you have. A lot of our staff is here, not everybody, but we'll do the best we can to answer them, knowing that we expect the questions to be more detailed next week. And that's it. That's the presentation.
Thanks, Bill. I think you should probably unshare it so that people can see each other.
Exactly. Someone who knows what they're doing will help you with that.
All right. Starting with council members, does anyone have any initial thoughts or questions? Tim?
Yes, to start, it is Bill works, so we're on, it just, so really we had Bill's memo to work from because we didn't get the budget till late yesterday afternoon and the books just appeared tonight, so we're not ahead of anyone else on this in terms of what to work with. But a couple of questions on your memo, Bill, there's a piece, possible new community center was mentioned on page 6, I think. What's that?
I think that's just the ongoing discussion about what to do about a rec center.
It's a rec center. Okay.
We've been calling the potential new center at the
Okay.
Elks Club a community center, not a rec center. But that's what that is. It's the same project that's been discussed.
Okay. Yeah, and I also had the same thoughts on health insurance because it's a big driver. That's a high percentage increase. Just a question, sounds like we're heading into negotiations on our major contracts soon. I haven't read them, but I remember from my school board days, in those contracts, there's a specified policy that the city has to buy. Is that the same for the city's labor contracts?
That's correct. And, not by design, but all 4 of our contracts are expiring on June 30. Just the way it happened to work. I would normally not be very excited about negotiating for contracts in the same few-month period, but it does give us an opportunity to work with our employee groups and look at different plans, different opportunities. I gave the same presentation to the employee group yesterday, and I think they're feeling this. They know that some coworkers are leaving, and I think if we can find some options that will meet, responsible healthcare needs, but also cut costs. I think
It needs to happen.
yeah, it does need to happen. And there are some ways we're looking into, and we will have more flexibility to do that with new contracts. So that's a top priority for the year.
Carrie.
Yeah, thank you for all this detail. Can you just reiterate what the tax rate increase was last year and compared to the proposal here?
Yeah, it was 4.9% for the city. I can't remember what the overall was with the schools. And one other thing I meant to mention, the school information is coming out next week. So we'll understand next Wednesday. So the night we're meeting there, they'll be getting their budget. So we'll have a better sense of what the school is looking at next week. Yeah, it was 4.9% for us.
So you had said something earlier about 4.9% and then 2% for the capital plan?
Yeah, so last year's budget was so ours was just 6.9 with all the ballot items in.
Last year?
No,
or
this year.
This year.
The proposed this year with all the ballot items in. So that's taking responsibility for the library, but also moving the community fund. I mean, I don't want to, I want to be transparent about that. We're taking it from our budget and putting it on the ballot. So we still have to.
But the 6.9% assumes that would pass on the ballot.
Right. And so what I was saying was last year's tax increase was 4.9%. Then we, as a policy, at least as a preliminary, said we were going to add another 2% for capital. No matter what we budgeted, we were going to increase the budget 2% for the capital plan. So all I was saying is if you looked at last year's 4.9%, put the 2% capital, you'd be at 6.9%, and that coincidentally matches where we are. So as a perspective of where we are. So, it's not, it's just is what it is. It doesn't have any great weight, but it's just observation.
Adrian.
Thank you for the presentations. So much information to absorb. But one of the things I keep coming back to in my mind is efficiencies. And you mentioned last meeting, you had an efficiency consultant come in and do the organizational assessment and look at, I don't know what it said, but I'd like to look at that report.
Yeah, it was a few years ago, but we could send you the.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I mean, a lot of organizations, I mean, this is tough, getting rid of positions and, especially the transparency of the strategic plan and all the technology, but there are other opportunities to still remain transparent that doesn't cost you $40,000. And there is still ways to provide a level of service while reducing the number of staff through efficiencies, automation. I mean, we're in 2024. I know AI is a very sensitive topic, but there are ways to automate our work. This is what I do every single day in my job. And we take, $60 million budgets and try to remove everything from email and automate it and have processes. And we've had to reduce staff. It's not easy, but I really want us to think about the future and how we operate our city with less while still remaining a high service organization, because that is what we're here for. We're customer service, we're service. And I truly believe that we don't have to sacrifice that level of service because we have to reduce our staff because of our budget, because it's the reality of where we are. And I want us still to be creative and, forward thinking and really have an open mind to that continuous improvement of getting rid of forms and permits and emails and really thinking about how we automate those processes. It can be done, and I just don't know what that report said, but it's never easy to get rid of people's jobs, but I still truly believe that we can maintain a level of service with the reduction of staff.
Well, we'd certainly be interested in engaging in a conversation with you about that and where you think those efficiencies could be made. Permits and things are generally required by law. So we are, a public agency, and so there's some clunky processes that, if I could do away with them, I would. But we're required to have them. I do want to point something out because I think it's important to point out. As you saw, 75% of our budget is public safety and infrastructure. And then when you add our parks and seniors and things, those are not automated positions. We can't automate someone to plow the roads. We can't automate a police officer to respond. We can't automate a firefighter. We can't automate someone who's working with a senior or providing a meal. We are in, grooming trails, cutting trees in parks. We are a very people-heavy business. So we look at our internal processes all the time. And we are stuck, I think, with grant requirements and those kinds of things, which are not user-friendly. So yeah, we're always on it. We are always trying to do it. And I can tell you, I'd be happy to send you that report from a few years ago. And I can tell you their conclusion then was that we were staffed right and tight.
You should probably send that to.
I'll send it to everybody. I'll be happy to.
Any other council members at the moment?
Another question.
Okay.
Hold on. I was trying to read through this quickly last night, but or maybe it was in the video. It was one of the documents I'd like to explore a little bit more in terms of the senior center. They talked about, I can't remember if it was in the video or written document, but they do receive grants, they do receive funding, they fundraise for a big portion of their organization, but they're limited. They're limited to the scope of the fundraising because they're under the city's umbrella. And so they did talk about, their options for fundraising, and maybe that is a way to expand their potential for bringing in additional federal funds and additional funding is to become a 501c3. I don't know if that's been explored or talked about, but something sparked that in the video and just their limitation for fundraising because they were under this umbrella. And so is that an opportunity for them to bring in more money, bring in more funding if they're not under the city and became their own 501c3?
So that we've had that discussion a lot over the years. There's two issues there. So I think I don't want to speak for Amy and she's here, but one of the avenues being explored is a parallel 501c3, like a Friends of the Senior Center. It's used very successfully in a lot of places. So you have a kind of a fundraising arm. And it's interesting, we've run into this a lot. I think the Montpelier Foundation had run into it a little bit, is that the tax benefits of donating to a city organization, the exact same as giving to a 501c3. It's just sometimes it's a perception. Like, you're the city, why do you need money? Can't you just raise taxes? Whereas, a nonprofit. So there definitely are some limitations. They're not legal limitations, but there are also some grants, I think, that are that voluntarily limit their granting not to local government. So we are exploring all of that, particularly since we've cut their appropriation down now to basically everything needs to be fundraised or through fees. So I would say the for them to continue operating and providing the services that people expect is going to need to have a much more robust fundraising piece to it.
So, as Tim said, I mean, I've been through it partly, and so I'll be hitting you with email questions all week, but just a couple of things. I mean, the health insurance increase, I don't know what it is in dollars. I mean, 22%.
$580,000.
Yeah. So Mr. Bellini talked about the tax increase as being a pay cut for him. Paying 22% increase in health insurance is a pay raise and ought to be balanced against what's the 3%, for example, that's figured across the board. I mean, in terms of total compensation, we have to start thinking that way, because or renegotiate the health coverage. So things like that, I think, are sort of fundamental to getting the cost of personnel down. Where people heavy business, it's costly.
Just to that point, if I may, city employees with a family plan, which is a large number, pay 20% of that cost themselves. So they are also getting, 22% increase in their contribution that comes out of their paycheck. So they are contributing to that cost. I mean, it's not the 80%, but there's already, I think, a direct financial impact to them. And we've talked about this before. I completely agree, all of it. And we have to get a handle on health insurance. I mean, the whole country has to get a handle on health insurance, frankly. But Vermont really seems to be in a crisis right now with healthcare and healthcare coverage, and not many providers. And it's a real thing. At the same time, we need to compete for employees. And when we are competing for police officers with other police departments and other states, or firefighters or public works people that are working, we have to, we have to be mindful of what the package is. And so, we did that. We retrenched a few years back, and we ended up with massive vacancies in police and fire, and not fire so much, police and public works, to the point that we had to actually revise our contracts, make contract to drastically increase wages to fill positions. And, to some extent, those have played in the last couple of years in our budgets, shaking that out. So if we want to deliver these services, we need to get the personnel. I mean, it's right now the job market is good for employees. And, maybe that will change, but so I'm with you all the way. I want to make sure we understand the full picture. It's, we can't, there's a few city employees sitting out here, and I'm sure if I just said, hey, we're going to pass all of this 22% on to your, wages and everyone in your departments, we probably wouldn't have as many employees sitting here. So,
Well, your point's well taken.
The person that demands a lot of services is clapping, so that's pretty cool.
And numbers plays a big part in why someone takes a job and stays in the job, but there are other factors that contribute there.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I just think we need to take a look at that in the bigger picture.
when we have
particularly
that
with-
opportunity this year, like I said, it was just chance that, that all of our contracts expire at the same time, but I think that really, I wish I could say that was a genius move on my part to set that up, but it wasn't. But it does provide us the opportunity to sit down with all our employee groups and say, what can we do that will work, that people can accept and that we can move forward because, we can all see that this is just going to continue and we're going to be cutting more people next year and the year after that. And then, folks that are being asked to do their jobs or supervise people to do their jobs won't be able to. And, that's my, we sit here this time of year and we deal with a lot of these questions and they're fair and they're important and they mean a lot to people. And the rest of the year, our inboxes and our phones are filled with people that, this didn't get done and how come this and why, why did they plow up the lawn in my driveway and why did this happen and how come, I called the cops and it took them 20 minutes to get there and, this, that, and the other thing. So people are expecting the services that they've had and how do we communicate, how do we navigate that? And I think that's where we're at right now. And if we're going to make changes in that, we have to be open and honest and upfront about it. We have for many years said, well, we can just cut and keep doing things. And I don't think we can. I'm just.
It makes me think about the question I had earlier was the library and the community service, was that on the ballot last year? Or was it?
The library's been on the ballot.
It's been on the ballot.
So the community fund has been in our budget.
But the library's been on the
The
ballot.
library's been on the ballot for a long time and since.
Does the ballot explain what the effect on the?
Yes, well, the
taxes
ballot
is?
doesn't, but we usually put that in the annual report, but it's not on the
It's in
ballot.
the annual report. Can it be on the ballot?
I'd have to look at that. I think we have to be careful about how we word items.
Well, I mean, and just in the interest of
Finan-
being,
yeah,
of
this
being
is-
transparent, I mean, if we know it's going to pass, we ought to just put it in the budget and let people know that what percentage it is. If it's
Yeah.
going to be in a ballot, they ought to still know.
Yep.
A lot of people vote without knowing.
Right.
They like the service, and I love the service myself. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been getting children books out of there for 5 years. But I think people need to know what the effect of what their
Well, we
vote
can
is.
certainly
Just-
look at what is allowed for ballot.
Well, if we want to be clear about what our actual increase is, it
Mhm.
includes those ballot items, really.
Yes.
And so just because we move it over,
Right.
we still ought to let people know
Right.
what it is.
And you could,
We can
and
definitely get that information out to people, whether it's on the ballot or not.
Right.
Exactly.
and you could decide to move that community fund back into the budget too. Just because we're proposing it this way doesn't mean it has, those are decisions you all can make.
Yeah, sure. Good, thanks.
Carrie.
I have a couple of little questions. Is there funding for the Montpelier Commission on Resilience and Recovery in here? And where does
No.
that show up? No.
No, we gave them
There's-
$100,000 this
Okay.
year from some reserves that we had
Okay.
or something.
But not
There's
again
no
for next
recurring
year.
funding.
Okay. And then the city council budget, I know it's a tiny little bit, but I see it's up. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why it's up and if maybe it doesn't have to be, if we could take a little bit more of a hit.
I bet it's the number of pay periods.
It's not necessarily council pay. I believe.
No, it's not
advertise-
pay.
It's
Yeah,
advertising.
It's advertising.
Okay.
But so why would the advertising be going up for city council?
It's based on, like, I would have bumped that up based on actuals. So we
Okay.
last year, in the past few years, have had a lot of advertising related to city meetings, and different items. So that's why that went up.
Thanks, Sarah. Tim.
So just following Carrie's question on resilience and recovery. So have we paid the 100,000 yet, or is that just something we've got on the books?
John says no. No, but we have it. We have the money. So yeah, we can.
It's in the mail kind of thing?
It's in the mail. Yeah.
Okay.
We're good for it.
It's like fund balance very close to monitored.
Great. I think we were just waiting for the audit to be.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, so Tim and I had a community meeting recently this past weekend where we had a lot of people from District 3 and other districts also turn out and talk about the budget. And one of the ideas that came up was the budget worksheet that we had at some point last year where people could actually go in and play around. That it would be helpful to have that sooner rather than later. And so I don't know if that's possible for us to get ASAP.
I could do my very best.
Okay.
My hope is to have it out Friday, but I've got some FEMA obligations, so it might be
Great.
early
Okay.
next week.
Okay, that's good. That's sooner than I thought it would be.
Excellent.
Yeah, I've been working on it already. I just need to
Okay.
vet
Thank
everything
you.
out.
Thank you.
Adrian, is your hand up?
Yes, I'm trying to think how I want to ask this question. So the Central Vermont Home and Health Hospice and the library, I know they're on the ballot side. We just vote yes, because I have no idea what that is. And it seems it's good, right? Who doesn't want to vote yes for the library? It's like, that sounds terrible, but it is a really big budget item that the city, that comes out of our budget. And I don't know if this is an opportunity for the library and maybe the Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice. Like, could they come and tell us a little bit more about, why they ask for this money, why it's on the ballot? I mean, I don't know, I can't find the money for the library, but it's like, isn't it over like $400,000 or something like that? They're asking for a 5% increase, and that's coming out. Can you just explain a little bit more about that? Because I'm just not like 100% sure how that works.
Yeah, we did have a long discussion about this at an earlier meeting, and you all voted to allow them to go on the ballot. So I can actually send you, we have a memo with all the history of it. There were times when the library budget was in the city's budget. There were times when the library was half in one and half in. And at some point, the city council said, it's not a city library. It's a private nonprofit library. It's designated as the city's library, but it's not a municipal, like we don't have any control over its operations. And at some point, the city council said, you know what, the library's budget is really between them and the voters, and we don't really control it. So why should we, they would come in and explain what they needed and why, but at the end of the day, the council couldn't vote, not to let them. Some years the council has made them petition when they wanted increases. In fact, I think you did this year, and I think they have petitioned for it. So there's really nothing we can do about it. They've submitted a proper petition and it's on the ballot. Anyone can do that. And then Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice, I think you allowed them to go on the ballot, and they're on, and as they had been in the past. So we've talked a lot about how to handle those agencies. And as Shana correctly mentioned earlier, we used to have 20 agencies on the ballot, and people voted individually, everything from $500 to $25,000 and everything in between. And the city council did create the community fund. There's a grant process. People submit, they take their job really seriously, and they make a recommendation, and the council approves that. And that has been in the council's budget, the city's budget year in, year out. And, this year, it was just one of those things. So as we were stripping everything else out, including our own departments, I mean, you saw the amount of money we pulled out of everything. It was like, look, we can't, how do we fund this and not all these other things? But on the other hand, it was like, can't say zero, right? These are just important work. These are important, when we count on those agencies. So our suggestion was just put that lump sum for the community fund on the ballot, and if voters want to support it, great. But it doesn't have to be. It could go back in the city budget as well.
Follow-up. So is it the city's responsibility to provide education to the community, like kind of what Sal was saying, maybe not put it on the ballot, but I feel like I've never been, maybe it's totally my fault, which is fine, I will just say that, but I've never been educated as to, why, like I would always vote for the library, but what does that mean? And that means that it impacts our tax increases, that it's, that's, so I don't know if that's ever been clearly, maybe it has and I've ignored it, but I just don't know if the general public knows that, you know, it's on the ballot, but that is going to increase our taxes. Like there's a direct correlation there. And I don't know if that's like a communication thing or, but I just feel like I've always just voted yes because I love the library and I've never really thought about, oh, well, that, you know, it's gonna increase my taxes. So I don't know if that's something that the city would do or if that's just something that's on the ballot and we just let it go. Good luck.
So, I mean, I think that's why we vote at town meeting is to decide how much taxes will be raised. That is the only reason we're voting on those numbers. So we, you know, have in the past made a great deal of effort to provide information, whether it was through our electronic media, that our annual report lays that all out. Back when we had the bridge page, I would do a very detailed summary of the budget and its impact of all the ballot items for people. And in fact, may just buy one page in the bridge this year to do that again, because I think it's an important way to get that out. But you know, what people know or don't know about what's included, you know, I don't know. That we can't. We try to provide all the information we can to people, and they've got to make their own decisions about what's important to them and why and how they vote.
And in that working budget sheet, you guys will get, it does show that what the increase is that is caused by the library and the ballot items. And it shows their rate % increase as well.
And by coincidence, you know, we're the amount that is proposed to put on the ballot for the community fund is about a penny on the tax rate. So you can, it's an easy equivalent. You can say, well, okay, well, if we don't vote this $130,000, that's a penny less in the tax rate. And you could do that with any other category expenditure. And when we get that interactive spreadsheet, we'll see that very thing. Lauren.
Thanks. I've got a few initial questions. First and foremost, just thank you to the city staff. Like this is such a hard budget and I know how difficult these conversations must have been, and getting a 24% increase down to this, just gratitude to the full team for the hard conversations and making so many of these challenging decisions. A couple specific questions for police department. I totally support trying to add back in the position as recommended. I just know we've kind of consistently been down officers. I assume you're confident we'll be able to fill and staff up, or like if that's not going to happen, then maybe like, I don't just put it. We hope, we aspire to. You have some candidates. Great. You're feeling good.
Set a goal for staff budget.
Okay, great. Okay.
And to that, also to that point, you know, and this happens really in all our departments, kind of to the basketball team analogy, right? If we're staffed at 16 or 17 and we're out one, then we still have 16. If we're staffed only to 16 and we're out one, then, you know, so if there's a vacancy or an injury or someone's in the academy, it just lowers the amount of people that are available. So yes, ideally DPW is, you know, fully staffed with nobody out, but the more authorized people they have, if somebody is out, they can still do their job. You know, Dan, by the way, great job. Dan Perry's here, our street supervisor. He handles all the snow plowing and all that stuff. It's a great job the last few days. And, you know, I think he could tell you firsthand about how, you know, when you're down a couple guys and you're trying to pull people off the water crew and out of the parks department and the rec, you know, the rec department to do water leaks. And, you know, it's really, so yeah, I think the goal is to have them staffed and full, but also to have that ability that if somebody's out, we still have enough people to deliver the goods. As you know, we've been down so far, we've had to really revise the way we actually deliver services overnight and those kind of things. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, Lauren.
Thanks. So my next question was about the DPW position. It seemed like we were getting information this year for the position that we didn't fill, that it almost seemed like we were paying more in contracts than a position might have cost. Like, is it possible that the projects will cost more because we're contracting out work that could be handled by a staff person more cost effectively? I'm just thinking like we're increasing the amount of projects that we're taking on, increasing the capital budget, but shrinking staff to manage that. And just how do you see that going? Is there a risk that we end up paying more, or that we can't actually do all the projects that we have planned? So just how do you see that playing out?
So we didn't reduce another DPW position this year. They're where they are. We did reduce one last year, and the thought at that point was there was a position internal in DPW that could be shifted to a street position, so that at least in terms of having a person going out and working on projects, it doesn't really help with the winter overtime, but for summer projects, there should be sufficient people. But yes, that was, as we had internal conversations, that was very clear. You know, they do a lot, whether it's utility lifting or, you know, they assist the contractors and saves us a lot of money. So, you know, there's a point beyond which cutting people is a negative cost.
May I too? When we were building the capital plan and we had the big $3+ million number, that was built partly considering we would get this staff position back. But as we pared it back, and with the 2-cent increase of $2.60, we built the capital plan around the staff we had, not adding back a position.
Thanks.
Thanks. My next question was about, it was kind of spread over a couple slides, but just trying to think about, get a better understanding of what's proposed to be invested in homelessness services for the upcoming year. So I saw the state is not funding the social worker, but now there's 50,000 for mental health outreach, which seems great. It looks like, is there money for the peer outreach workers anymore, or is that going away?
That's what that would be. I mean,
That would, okay, that's that.
the 50,000, you want to explain that?
Eric Nordenson from the police department. I learned recently that the state was pulling the funding, the match for our crisis clinician. My hope is that we can retain her through Washington County. And a lot of that $50,000 would be going to Washington County to help with that outreach. She's on maternity leave right now, and my numbers are reflecting the lack of her being here. And a lot of the outcomes aren't not the desired outcomes that I'd want to have. So we're partnering quite a bit with Washington County Mental Health. They're willing to accept, hopefully I didn't do that. They're willing to accept, you know, the demands of what we're asking for, which is great. The state has a real big shift right now towards a mobile crisis model, which we are lucky enough to have that right off of Berry Street, the old Bluens building there at the Access Hub. So we rely on them to help with additional outreach, which is included in what we pay for. But they're also relying on 988, which is kind of a subsidiary of 911, where it's a crisis person. And that's how we're going to start to divert crisis calls to 988 and not necessarily the police department. So there's a lot of stuff, you know. The short answer is yes, I think we'll get the services that we need. I could always use more, but we're kind of there.
One more, Jack.
Yeah.
So just, it's a bigger conversation, but with this move, the last, this year and now proposed again for next year, to zero out many of our city committee budgets, I think we need to have a look, like, not right now, but like, what are the committees? If we're not giving any money to do anything, do we keep having them, or do we change the charge? Do we update what we're asking of committees if we're no longer providing any resources for them to do their work? Or is there like a different model where projects come to us, or so, like, is there a different way we approach instead of just kind of the past model of a standing amount of money that then they would figure out how to, do public arts or whatever? So I just think we need to rethink, if we're kind of going to systemically zero out, then what we're asking them to do might no longer be tenable. Or, I mean, maybe it is, and it probably depends committee by committee, but I just think it's worth looking at, so that I don't want to have a bunch of people volunteering their time, but then kind of pulling the rug out under the ability to fund things. And I think in this budget moment, think it's an appropriate place to be cutting, unfortunately, and just begs a bigger question of what we're asking of them.
Lauren, I think that's a great point. We could also, I'll just mention that it's just a couple of meetings ago that we had the presentation from the Public Art Committee, and we've had a tremendous amount of positive feedback to the new murals. But they had the big presentation of projects that they'd done with very, very little money from the city, like from the part of the $10,000 that was left over from a couple of years ago, because we didn't fund them last year or this year. And so I don't know. I have the same question about the tree board cutting out their $4,000. I assume they have funds from elsewhere to do other work that they're doing, but that's something I'm interested in finding out. And yeah, Adrian. Oh, okay, good. I was gonna jump on her.
One of the items that we did cut pretty significantly was economic development. And that, I mean, I think it was $100,000. And so are there any economic development is really important to the city. We have lots of vacant properties, which are potential for future income. And so we cut $100,000. I don't know what that economic development was for $100,000. So maybe that's my first question. And two, how are we still going to look at economic development opportunities in this city to ensure we're not being short-sighted and, 5 years from now, how are we going to, what is our plan to bring in businesses? What is our plan to partner with, companies within our central Vermont area? Like, what is that plan? And was that part of the $100,000, or is there other opportunities to focus on economic development?
So there's a little bit of a history to that. I mean, I'll do my best here. First of all, everything on that list that was cut had been put in the budget because it was something that was important to the city and was a priority and was and probably still is needed. They're just because they were zeroed out doesn't mean they're not important. And this item was actually cut last year, and it was on the list for restoration this year, and we couldn't see how to do that and still do everything else. We, a number of years ago, did do an economic development plan, and it recommended creation of a nonprofit group. Tim, I think, was on the board. Trying to remember the name, Montpelier Development Corporation. And so the city funded that to the tune of $100,000 a year, and they used that money and hired an executive director. And then at some point, combination of COVID and them having difficulty keeping a director. They just had a bad luck string of directors. And at some point, that commission didn't really work. So we restructured actually the Josh Jerome's position before he was here. So when we hired him, we had retooled it to include an economic development component. And so we're really addressing that through staff in the planning department, but we certainly could. So I don't know that we would necessarily need $100,000. Certainly having some funds to do things with would be great, but, create it. And then 1 year, so the last year we had that money, we put all or some of it toward the Country Club Road work, the plan, creating the actionable plan, recognizing that is a huge economic development project. And so that is really our biggest economic development project right now, to create more housing, create more infrastructure. So that's sort of where our focus is. So I think if we had that money, we listed that plus the 50,000 for Country Club Road, those probably could have been one and the same. But that's kind of the story of economic development.
What is the relationship with the city and the Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation? Do they provide support to the city in terms of economic development, or is that more like an umbrella organization, or what's the story behind that? And I'm just thinking of partnerships that we might want to utilize if we do cut that out. Like, how do we partner with these organizations to continue economic development? Because we can't stop that, because in 5 years, if we haven't focused on economic development, we'll be, I think, in a worse place than we are now.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah, like I said, that's one of the reasons why, the MDC had a staff person, and when that staff person went away, that's why we made sure we had some staff capacity in-house to focus on that. So we didn't lose complete sight of it. But obviously floods and things also get in the way. For as far as CVEDC is concerned, and I don't know if you know more about this, Tim, maybe you do, maybe you don't. They do serve Montpelier. They really are geared towards serving like individual businesses and for small business loans and those kinds of things. And the director was very helpful to us in flood recovery. She attended a lot of the meetings of our downtown, but they don't really provide a service to the city per se. They're a resource for businesses in our area, but they're not really our economic development arm.
Palin, you had your hand up a little while ago. I don't want, and I had it in my head to keep checking to make sure that you're not overlooked, even though you're not here. So do you have something you need to get in now?
Yes. Hi. Okay. I was waiting for the to be unmuted. So I agree all the comments that each city councilor made before me, but I have some additional feedback. So as far as I understood all this discussion, as a city governance system, we cannot change or we cannot restructure what we do, right? Because we have to provide similar services, even if our city's population is lower than in the past, even if we have, as a city, less revenue, it doesn't matter. We have to provide the same services to the public. So we cannot change or revise what we do. But can we restructure or rethink how we do things? So I know that Kelly and Bill attending all this like national conferences about municipal governments and what they do. I am very curious to hear from both of you. Is there any discussion for the future of city governments and just like changing how they do things? Because if there will be no change or no restructuring, then it will be like a circle or cycle we are just talking about. In the end, the only solution is increasing the tax rate. That's it, because there's no other way, right, to do things. But increasing tax means, like a person like me, I don't get increase in my salary. Actually, it is going down every year. So when I, as a resident, pay more tax, which means that I am earning less and less, and maybe in 5 years, I will not be able to, live here. I cannot really provide resources to pay tax increase every single year. So I just want to start first asking, is there any like discussions among all different city governments changing things, how they do, because their services should stay same, right? Like public safety, like rec department, community projects. So can we think about like for next 5 years instead of only this year? Because otherwise, again, the solution will be, cutting positions, which if we do every year, then there will be no city staff to work with, right? So that's not the solution. Increasing taxes, like we cannot do this forever, then we will lose residents. I bet other city governments are facing the same challenges. So yeah, so is there any discussions about it that our city can adopt? So this is my first comment about the budget.
Your first simple question.
Sorry.
That's the stuff we think about all the time is how can we adjust what we do internally, but also in, conjunction with other departments. Yes, other places are talking about this a lot. We have I think there's been more success in Chittenden County with some sharing of services because more of the cities and communities have a wider range of services. We have a real disparity of service provision here in central Vermont where you've got Montpelier and Barre City who pretty much have the full gamut of, police, fire, public works, the water, sewer, all the things. And then you have much smaller towns that only have maybe a part-time police department and a volunteer fire department and, 4-person road crew. And so it's a completely different model of services. And in many cases, those communities really depend on us for things like senior centers and parks and those sorts of things. It's not an easy conversation to go to them and say, hey, you should be, paying us for the use of these services. But we do try to deal with that with fees for like rec services and senior centers. There's a higher rate for non-residents and those kind of things. But how we share service, I know and then what really happens is we're all at the stage now where we depend on each other, even on an informal basis. If there's a major police call, other departments come and help each other. If there's, obviously if there's snowstorms, everyone's out plowing their own roads, but if something unusual happens in one community, then the other communities will come. Barry had a bunch of water leaks and we sent folks over and, try to help them because they need it and vice versa. And, fire departments will have mutual aid to respond to calls and our ambulance system relies on Barry Town and East Montpelier, to back us up if we're out. People, we function that way already. If we were staffing to do all of that stuff just ourselves without relying on them, our staffing would be half again as big. So there's a lot of that's already built into what we do, but can we do more of it? Sure. I think we're always talking to each other about what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy hearing this because it is really important to focus how we do things instead of like, okay, let's cut more positions and like, oh, then you will get less services. No, is there any way we can improve the way we do things? So the second one is, I saw local option tax as a recommendation. I know it's just a recommendation, but after the flood, like some business just to stay downtown, they are using like GoFund campaigns and everything. So they are really facing so many challenges. So is there any other plans in addition to offering local option tax? Because I voted no like 2 years ago when we were talking about this, and I'm really not favorable with this because our downtown businesses are struggling a lot. Is there any other discussions city staff did about like, yeah, we want to receive revenue from downtown businesses, but not the local option tax, but something else? So is there any alternative for that recommendation?
So first of all, I want to be super clear that we staff, I am not, as part of the budget, I'm not recommending that we adopt local options tax. So just 100%.
You are proposing.
So what I said was, I'm not even really proposing. What I said was,
so I don't know.
There's a list of, if we want to reduce the tax rate, here's some things we could do. Okay. So it's an idea that could be considered, but I'm not, you're not getting a proposal from the staff saying, hi, we suggest that you do this. We're saying in the toolbox of things you can consider, this is one of them.
But
And
that's not built into this budget.
is not, yeah, it's not built into the budget. It's not assumed anything. I think, the reality is, we are proposing already that we increase the downtown improvement district tax, and that will come from buildings in the downtown, and proposing that we increase or take away the sprinkler credit that is primarily in commercial buildings. A lot of those are in the downtown. So, those buildings are going to feel it, that those property owners are going to feel it. And if you make those decisions, as far as revenue sources, the state limits us pretty, what we can and can't do. And the only thing that's really available to local governments now is we've already got the rooms, meals, and alcohol tax in local options, but we don't have the local sales tax. So that's the only thing that's really left is that we can legally do. And it's also the only thing that really brings in any kind of real significant revenue between $450,000, $500,000 a year. That said, there's a lot of problems with it, and certainly understand the fragility of the downtown and the circumstances that we're in. I know Barry has it, Berlin has it now. So one of the concerns in the past have been our neighbors don't have it, but now they both do. But that said, that is a discussion for another day. But I mentioned it mostly because we were brainstorming every possible idea to come up with ways to lower the tax rate. And secondly, the legislature has changed the law on that. It used to require a charter change, and now a simple vote of the town, you can adopt it. So you don't have to change your charter. Anyone can adopt it without a charter change. But if the council doesn't want to take it up, that's fine. It was just like, here's a list of things that we could consider to reduce the.
Thank you, Bill. Maybe it is my English.
No, that's okay.
When I say recommendation, I was just like, it was in your presentation, right? So I don't want
I
to.
appreciate that. I was mostly making that clear for anybody else that was watching or listening or, writing articles or anything that.
Yeah. So thank you for clarifying it. And the last thing I want to mention, are there any discussions combining departments in the city? So there will be change in the number of staff, but the services will be same. So I just want to learn this, and this is my last comment about the budget. Again, it is kind of a maybe future planning question, but it might also affect the budget. So thank you.
Yeah. So to answer that question, I mean, obviously a lot of the services are, pretty unique. We wouldn't combine DPW with the fire department, for example. But we certainly have looked at, I think in particular, our community services, Parks, Rec, and Seniors, they already sort of function under an umbrella. They're not really one department, but they share admin and they share some resources. And now this coming year, there's going to be even more sharing of actual maintenance resources to between the two. So there's a lot of functional sharing, and even if they're not administratively sharing. We have a couple of people that there's a rec employee who occasionally assists with DPW. He's a former DPW employee, is skilled at water breaks, so sometimes is called in to help with a water main break if they're down with staff. We're looking at possible parks employee who has a commercial driver's license that might be able to help with plowing or running a sidewalk plow. So there's, we're always looking at how we can do those things and still also maintain the core priority for each department. And same with our admin folks. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing now. This budget, we're combining a whole bunch of jobs with people doing 2 jobs that they used to do 1.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Palin. Folks, I know that there are more people who want to have observations, but we also zoomed right past our 8:30 break. So I'm going to call a 10-minute break now because I don't want people to be sitting uncomfortably waiting for their chance to have their say. All right. Are we We last heard questions and comments from Counselor Cohen. Are there any other council members who have questions and comments at this point? Yes, Adrian.
Just have questions.
Well, that's what we're here for
I know.
tonight. So, yeah.
So one of the things I was thinking about, and I don't know, I just preface, I do not know how, I don't know, is that better? Okay. I don't have that little thing on there. Is that what it is?
It's okay.
I don't know. So one of the things I was thinking about, I don't know if this has been talked about or even if it's an effective tool, but thinking about economic development and the vacancy rate that we have in our town, is there research done or any type of, I don't know, white paper on a vacancy tax for Montpelier? Is that something that we would think about? Does it work? Is it something that's effective? I'd like to know a little bit of research about that. That's one. And then two, I just wanted to, say that the city does provide a space in our city building at no cost, and we are renting office space. So I think that's an opportunity for cost savings. I wanted us to look at that and think about that in terms of the third floor of City Hall, and that we're paying rent for the planning department to rent offices. And so I just wanted to explore that a little bit more and see if there's opportunities for cost savings there.
The planning department rental will be covered by FEMA.
And I can tell you, yes, over the years, the idea of doing some kind of vacancy tax to create an incentive for people to not let property owners to not let their properties sit vacant has come up a number of times over the year. And I definitely think it's worth discussing. It may not be a moneymaker per se, but if we can get some property owners to stop sitting on vacant property, there's value to that. Tim,
I mean, we're not here to debate vacancy tax tonight, but I don't
right.
think that's a constructive way to go. I mean,
Okay.
It's just, we can talk through it this another time, but I think I'd rather see positive incentives to make things happen. And that's a really negative step. Because a lot of these properties you may view as vacant, but if they've got uses going on that you just view as minimal, that can just be a legal challenge, and it's who wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I agree. We've done a number of things to do positive incentives, tax stabilization and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I think we should be looking at every possible.
I think the biggest vacancy issue we've got in town right now is the state of Vermont.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for FEMA money to start putting their campus back together, much as we're waiting for FEMA money to put ours back together. And if we could break that logjam, I think it would help Montpelier a lot.
I'd also just note on, toward the economic development front, that one of the charges of Montpelier Alive is to help fill, storefronts, that, they're not a true economic development agency, although they certainly have been a partner with us over the years on things. But downtown, economic vitality of downtown is one of their four key, the sort of four pillars that they work around, and that's one. And so they are constantly trying to, I think, promote people and look to help fill. They work with landlords, and I think the conclusion in the past when we've looked at vacancy tax, and not to belabor this, but is that it's really hard to tell why there's a vacancy. Is it just the economy? Is someone trying? Is it is someone, so if they're paying their taxes and keeping their bill, I think it became more of a, if the building is not meeting building codes or those kind of standards, then we have enforcement for those things. If it's safe, or we're telling people how to use their own building, their own asset. So I think that's the counter argument to it.
I think I was just looking at an ordinance recently, and I think it was from Burlington, and it had to do to trigger the tax. It not only had to be vacant, but it also had to be like deteriorated. So
Memorial Auditorium.
just to pick one off the top of your head that happens to be owned by the city or
Owned by
was
the
until
city,
recently?
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Carrie.
Just to remind us about short-term rentals and that, we decided not to collect any fees on short-term rentals, but that is another potential source of revenue. It's not very much. It's not going to, make a huge difference, but if we're thinking about other revenue sources, that is one that we can come back to.
I've got a couple of questions that I've thought of, and a couple of comments or questions that I've thought of, and a couple of things that I've heard about from other people. So I just wanted to throw into the discussion. Last budget season, we spent a lot of time talking about controlling overtime as a way of limiting expenditures. And is there anything we've learned that we can sort of seed the discussion at this point, Bill?
I think we've learned that it's really difficult and that a lot of our overtime is controlled by external factors, whether it's weather or calls for services. We did try last winter the overnight crew, and that had mixed success. And we, as we talked about, most of the time that we ran it, there was no snow. So that was an issue. I think with, police has managed their some, but also has had a lot of vacant positions, so have had to use overtime to backfill. I think fire has, put a couple things in and is still looking at it, but it's not, there's not a single, like, we're just going to cut back on overtime and still deliver what we need to deliver. So, again, it would be kind of, are we willing to accept less people on duty? Are we willing to accept a different response type? Are we willing to accept, that would be the way to do that.
We periodically here, and I think I've heard already at least one comment or email. What about saving money on the Community Justice Center? It's worth pointing out, city tax dollars do not pay for that. So there's no savings there. I got an email that I think all the members of the council got, and including Bill. And so I'll just, for people out there watching, I'll mention some of the questions that were raised. One is, would we get anywhere, or could we improve things by moving to a 3 or 5 year budget plan, rather than doing it year by year? Another question is, are we getting the services most efficiently by contracting out our IT services? That's about $400,000. And the person who raised the question said, well, Barry City has one person doing it. And I have a hard time believing that's all they have for their city government. But if they do, I can't believe they're getting the same services. But it's probably worth looking into what the most efficient way of doing that is. And I've heard some discussion whether it's possible to share the tower truck with other municipalities. Obviously, that's not a question that we get an answer to today, but it's worth throwing out there. And if there's no other questions or comments from the council, now I want to open it up to members of the public who might have any questions or comments, starting with people in the room. Tom.
Thomas Moore, Prospect Street. I went to that little meeting at the library with Tim and stuff. Biggest thing that I had, and there was other people there at it, is tax exempt properties. It looks like our department heads and the city are really cutting back here, doing their job on personnel. Our basketball team bill is small. We need, a little bit more. Our taxpayers, like counselor there is talking about that she's not, she's getting a decrease in pay. That's just like every one of us taxpayers. We really need help. We have, what, 30% tax exempt property? Is it, Bill? I don't know. That's what I've heard, 30%.
We'd have to get that
If it's
number.
30%, we've got to ask them, you've got to help us out. You've got to help the city, the departments. You've got to help the taxpayers. We need your help. And then another thing I was thinking about is, let's just use the library. Tax exempt property. They give $400,000 from the taxpayers plus tax exempt property. Can we, with tax exempt properties, you're already getting a bonus from the taxpayers by your property being exempt. Should they be allowed on the ballot to ask for another $20,000-$30,000? That's a double dipping here. I don't know. We really need to help. And I think tax exempt properties have got to help us out. The city and the taxpayers. They use our services. And we're going down as taxpayers as, like she said, a decrease in our pay. It's not right. It would serve everybody if they paid their share. And I would like the council to, I don't know, write a letter, ask them or demand it. We need the help. They use our city. Please do something about it. All these guys here, the chief, this public works, I want him to be at my house in 2 minutes, not 20. He's already gotten rid of that dog. And I thought that was a very important thing for public safety. Fire chief, I was on the fire department for 18 years. I know how hard these guys work. Going out in the middle of the night, that really sucks when it's minus 20 degrees out. We need some help
Thanks,
from
Tom.
them. Thank you.
Thanks. Eric or Derek,
Can I just pop in on that? Sure. Just quickly. Just so you know, Tom, and for everybody else that's listening, the biggest tax exempt property, of course, is the state, and they pay us $1.4 million in payment in lieu of taxes, which is essentially full property tax payment. They're up that. So I think there's a misnomer there that the state doesn't pay us taxes, but they really pretty much do pay their full local property tax, and then ed taxes, through the statewide ed fund. So then you're left with, churches and small, county buildings. And so, obviously the city we don't pay taxes on our own buildings. The schools don't pay taxes. The library is a public building. So I think you then look at what the statutes are for tax exemption and yes, we have a lot of tax exempt properties, and the biggest chunk of it is the state, and they're paying their share. So I just want to be clear about that.
Right. But I remember, I think like 10 years ago, Bill, you did write a letter asking them to pay, could you help us?
thanks, Tom. I think it's more like
Well, I know, but
Tom, your 3 minutes are up.
none of them responded
Tom,
with a yes or no.
I think it was more like 20 years ago, but I remember that.
All the time.
You don't. That's right.
And it's,
Thanks,
we
Tom.
all need the help.
I'll ask the two chiefs. How fast do you get over to someone's house in an emergency? Pretty fast, right? Uh-huh. Okay.
A lot of it depends on staffing, simultaneous calls for service, location of the call. Everyone in the station, something in proximity.
It was very interesting in your video to see that you had something like 310 overlapping calls when you were already out on one call and another call came in over the course of a year or so. Anybody else in the room or online who has questions or comments to make? Steve.
Yeah.
Steve Whitaker, to me, my impression of that budget presentation is that it's tinkering, it's holding harmless, it's protecting the team. The idea that we're gonna, you know, I didn't quite understand the downtown improvement district. It looked like a tax mechanism to, but I noticed no restrooms. Oh, and actually even the slide says one restroom. You know, we need restrooms all over town and we needed them for years and we've done jack crap to get a plan together to even build them when the money does become available. That's a failing of management. No emergency housing. You know, we're going to fund, you know, mental health. We'll unfund shelter so that we can create mental health problems and then fund somebody to just handle the mental health problems. That's just twisted. I mean, we had 3 people die last week, you know, living out in tents. There's 77 staff on the sheet that in the proposed budget, making over 100,000. Many of them well over 150,000. That's wages plus benefits. And Fraser at topping out at 241, I believe, salary and benefits. That it's really time to, and what I heard most in the District 3 meeting, it's like almost unanimous. Everybody's like, trim the top. Start with the personnel. We've got a city manager, we've got an assistant to the city manager, we've got an assistant city manager, we've got a communications director, we've got a sustainability coordinator who was supposed to get the district heat to run in the black, and he's doing everything but district heat's not running in the black. It's not attractive for anybody else to sign on, and he's doing now half of the work that Bill used to do, managing contracts for maintenance. Sprinkler, taking away sprinkler credits is definitely going to raise rents for the people who, you know, the landlords that they're just going to put it right back into the rent for the tenants. Oh, we got a planning director and an assistant planning director. You know, Josh Jerome at least raises his own salary plus, you know. Mike doesn't want to read the law, doesn't want to follow the law, doesn't want to, you know. So parking, we got 3 positions, people that run around and either dust off parking meters or pour out coins and write tickets. If we're not bringing in the revenue to pay for those 3 salaries, we would be better off marketing Montpelier as a free parking zone for a while and try to see if we could use that as an economic development strategy. Instead of, I recommended that we charge Green Mountain Power for the 4 spaces that they put these chargers in. And instead we paid to put a sign up that says you got to pay the meter while you're charging your car.
Thanks, Steve. That's your 3 minutes.
Did you understand the mismanagement level of that? It would raise more money to charge Green Mountain Power than it would to spend money on a sign.
Thank you. Is there anyone out there in Zoom land? Please raise your hand electronically, preferably. And if you have any questions or comments to make, and I promise you, this is not your last opportunity. Anything more from council before we wrap up? Oh, there is. Oh, okay. And that is Joe Castellano. Joe, thanks for joining us. Joe, could you unmute yourself? I think you should be able to do that. So unmute yourself and turn the camera on if possible. I remember, here we are, maybe. I remember recently Joe was trying to be heard and he had a bad connection. Okay. Yeah, that could be why. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we can.
Here, how do I raise my hand?
Okay. Is that Gail Carrigan? Okay, great.
So I actually just unmuted and Joe is going to come on and have his say.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, there's something going on with my laptop and I can't unmute. So can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. You
Can
and
you see
your
my dog?
Yep.
Hey, I know that everybody's very concerned about the budget. One of the things that we've all talked about, and I've heard everybody talking about cuts and everything. And I honestly think that we should probably see what we can do as far as raising revenue or attracting new businesses to the city. I mean, that should be part of the discussion too. And I don't have any suggestions right now.
Well, you'll have plenty of opportunities to make them if you come up with any.
Okay, but I was just wondering if there's anybody who's approached us, any businesses that are looking at possibly, the Connors building has been vacant, and I know initially he wanted to have like a tap room or something there to sort of tie in with Bar Hill, but I don't know if there's been any discussions with Connor.
Neither do I, and I assume that any discussions that are going on will only be public when they can become public.
Okay, all right.
I can confirm though that I've had multiple direct conversations with Fred Connor about that building and multiple direct communications with Joe Miles about the RK Miles site. And I think they're, certainly offered to do whatever the city can do to assist them. I think they know that, they appreciated it, and they are doing what they're trying to do to market their sites. We meet regularly with anybody who's interested in talking about projects. And obviously our biggest emphasis right now is housing, because that is not only economic development, but more people in and more shoppers to then create more of a demand, for businesses to locate. So.
And I guess touching back on the housing, in the budget presentation this evening, I saw there was a $1 million line item for, I believe it was for Isabel Circle, the development proposal. And I thought it was a 1.7 million bonding. Am I mistaken in that?
Yeah, I don't think it's that high. I had said approximately 1 million because we're still getting the final number. It'll be on next week's agenda, I think.
Next week's or the following week? Because you're every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I don't think we're meeting. The following week would be the 25th.
Not meeting on the 25th. We are.
Okay.
So we're meeting on the 18th instead.
All right. Yeah, because my concern is that, I'd like to see what sort of development plans they have, because right now they're planning on just selling off lots to a potential developer. And I know that Gabe's been in discussion with developers, but I don't know what fruition or what sort of conversations he's had and what sort of, costs or what sort of housing proposals they have.
Thanks, Joe. We actually did have him come in and speak to us 1 or 2 meetings ago, and members of the council had questions mainly relating to what kind of surety they would be able to provide if the tax revenues aren't forthcoming, and I think that's what we're going to be talking about next time in large measure.
Yeah, because I'm also concerned about the time frame, because I think that honestly, it's going to be at least a 2 or 3 year project, because I did some analysis. Vacant lots sell about 3 a year on average over the last couple of years. So that means we have, quite a timeline of supply there. If
Joe,
lots.
Joe, I'm going to jump in because that's your 3 minutes. Thanks for joining us, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again.
Okay.
Anything else from any members of the council before we wrap this up? I'll just give my final observations tonight, which I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to discuss this, is that we're hearing a lot of people talking about how the city should be focusing on needs and not wants. And I think if we look at what the budget that's proposed before us, we've cut out all the wants. We are focusing directly on the needs. a city with a high need and high demand for services. And we're trying to address that with the capital plan, with roads. All of us hear a lot from constituents about the quality of the roads, and we're trying to address that. Plowing obviously is something we're seeing emails about plowing, and roads division. It's like overnight they turned on, they flipped the switch and they turned winter on, and so here we are. Police calls we know are going up. And then one other thing that is just striking to me, because we kind of think of ourselves as equivalent to Barrie. Montpelier is 10 square miles. Barrie is 3 square miles. So in terms of what our needs for services and what we have to do, there's a lot the city has to do. And so I think that what we have before us is really, it's hard to responsibly go below what budget we've seen proposed tonight. But I know we'll be talking about that again. We do not have any other business, so I'll go right.
I do have
go
one
ahead.
quick question on the budget. This is more just organizational. We do have a meeting next week. Wondering if there's, most of our folks I think will be available, but is there any department in particular you want like to be sure to have here? Just, I know people have holiday stuff. We could free some people up for, if you have a preference for who you'd like to see next week versus the week after, that would be great for them, but obviously we're here to serve at your pleasure. So if you don't have anything in particular, that's fine too. So I'd ask while you're here.
I don't know right now, but
Yeah.
anyone should email Bill.
Yeah. I mean, I assume the big departments will have here, but
Yeah.
So, if you're no sense for rec or seniors or whatever to sit here all night if we're not going to really get into them. So,
Yep.
But on the other hand, if you want to start with those, then I'm sure they're here. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
All right.
that's all. Thanks.
Maybe the other piece, just different budget process. It seems like the videos have started coming out. I watched them last night. I don't know if we've all had a chance to do it, but it'd be great if we could all watch those in advance so we don't have to repeat that whole piece at each meeting.
Yeah, I don't know if I watched every single one, but I watched the ones that were up when I was online. I thought they were really very good and very informative. I encourage everybody to, not only on council, but people in the city to watch them.
Yeah, thanks. And I think the plan is have them all done by Friday, right? Is that? They'll be up tomorrow morning. Okay, look at you go. So, yeah, so they'll be done.
So, council reports, starting with Adrienne.
Nothing this week.
I have 3 things and I'll try to keep them quick. One is I just want to note that since I'm married to the city clerk, I won't take part in any discussions or decision about the city clerk budget. And when it comes time to actually vote on the budget, we'll have to remember to have
Pull
2
that out,
separate
yep.
ones, so I don't vote on his budget. The other thing is we got an email, I think we all got an email a little while ago about somebody who's concerned about the street crossing situation for kids by the library, that there's no crossing guard there for students, and they were concerned about that. And it also made me sort of think this is the time of year when, the time change happens and all of a sudden you're driving home from work and it's dark and you can't see the pedestrians and everyone wears black. And it's impossible to see people. So I've seen in other communities, they have these little pedestrian flags that are kind of mounted on corners, and you can just grab one as you walk across the street. And it makes you just a little bit more visible. I know that there's been an effort to try to get people to wear reflective clothing and stuff. And I have like a reflective thingy that I don't know where it is. If I could keep track of it, I'd use it. But so that's not something that I think the city should be putting money out for, but I thought there may be some part of the community that's interested in that. And I would love to have any conversations with anyone. It's not an expensive thing to do at all. And then the final thing is that we had my neighborhood on St. Paul Street, a group of neighbors has started organizing around sort of a community neighborhood cooperative theme. And we're going to have a little meeting this coming weekend to try to, coordinate and everything. But today, even before we had done that, somebody sent out an email to the folks on our street saying, we've got all this rain coming. We're worried about flooding. If you can run out and just check the drains in front of your house and maybe clear them away, that would be great. And I mean, by the time I even got to the email, by the time I read it, like 3 people had already jumped in and said, okay, yeah, we're doing it. We got it covered. And all the drains were cleared away. And I just thought, this is perfect. This is the kind of thing that we have to do. Great. If Public Works can come around and clean every drain every day and keep everything perfect, great. But that's just not really realistic. And so when we can all just kind of like look around at our own block, our own community and say, what can we do that's going to make things a little bit better? If the sidewalk didn't get plowed in time, maybe you can just shovel in front of your house and contribute a little bit. And then also I know that the Montpelier Commission is working on neighborhood organization, and I've seen some stuff on Front Porch Forum about that. And I'm very hopeful about that and really hope that people will take advantage of that and come together and try to, even if it's just in informal ways, talk to your neighbors and try to work together and stuff.
Thanks, Carrie. Sal?
Just wanted to alert the council to a proposal that the homelessness task force approved today for the use of the 40,000 in ARPA money that needs to be committed by the end of the year. I think it's a pretty good proposal. It'll be on the agenda for next week. And the proposal should be, part of the packet. So take a look at it before the meeting.
Great, thanks. Tim?
Just checking the flood gauges, and it looks like the water's up a couple feet since noontime, but not a lot. So if you live in a low area, check online, keep track of the gauges. It looks like it's going to be close to the action level when it peaks. But if you got a car in a low place or a lot of personal property in the basement, maybe you want to move a few things up.
Palin?
Nothing for today, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Lauren? Okay, for mayor's report, I've got a couple of items. One is that I've been hearing from constituents and people in my neighborhood specifically about still having problems with getting mail delivery and mail being very slow. And so I'm going to see what I can do to prompt to find out what's going on from the post office, and so I encourage anyone else to email me if wherever you live, you're also having problems. Second, we all know the federal building news is that the federal government is not going to looking to not keep the building, and so we're just at the very beginning of the process, but we're told that there's GSA, the General Services Administration, is going to be setting up meetings with the city and our congressional delegation and to talk about what the process will be. It's not likely to be fast, but on the other hand, I heard that when they went through this in Portland, Maine, it took 10 years to get the property sold, and I'm not trying to see it take 10 years here in Montpelier. Last week, we had a meeting up at VCFA or at Greenway Institute regarding flood resilience for the Winooski watershed, and there were representatives from people all up and down the watershed, from Cabot and Washington all the way up through Montpelier and Waterbury to Winooski, Colchester. I don't remember if anyone from Burlington was there, but it was the beginning of what I think is going to be a fruitful discussion of ways that we can work together to address flood threats in the Winooski watershed. And I was very pleased by how everybody in the meeting recognized that this is a shared issue that takes collective action. We didn't hear anyone from the little towns saying, well, whatever happens to Montpelier is Montpelier's problem. It's not our problem. They definitely are interested in working with us. So it's a long road, but it starts with a few steps. And finally, I saw something on Front Porch Forum, someone asking, well, what's going on with that lot on Main Street? And what's going on is that we are trying to market that property. And that's all I've got. Do we have a city clerk report?
Filling in for John tonight. I just wanted to draw your attention to the Board of Abatement meeting has been rescheduled to January 9th at 6:30. And there's a little supplement on your desk there for the packet. That's all I have.
Thank you. City manager's report.
Thank you. So Councilmember Heaney's ahead of me. I haven't checked the gauge yet tonight, but I did want to note that we do have a flood watch. We have our team has been meeting and watching. We're hopeful the trend, the projection is that it will just barely get below action stage. And to be clear, action stage is really when you should start active prep. It's still several feet before flooding. But nonetheless, we also know the gauges can change and if the storm sits. So I just wanted to let people know and DPW has been out clearing drains and our teams are, preparing and we're ready to move. And we've been sending communications out about that. You may want to consider starting the meeting a little bit early next week, depending on how long we want to spend on the budget, because we also have the Stevens folks coming in to talk about the flood the flood repairs. And sounds like we're going to get the appraisal numbers for the Country Club Road that you asked for, as well as the DPW engineering report on the road. We're supposed to be having the Isabel Circle people back with information. And there's a group that wanted to briefly talk about rec stuff to two individuals. I'm meeting with them Friday to see if I can hone that message or find another time for them. And then the ARPA proposal from the homelessness task force. So, whether you just want to say, hey, let's start at 6 and go till 7:30 with business and then 7:30 on for budget or something like that. I don't know. It's up to you, but
Are people available to start at 6 if I can do it? Is that a yes from you, Palin?
So I work in San Jay Wednesdays and I am driving.
Oh,
So I will try to make it, but like even 6:30 sometimes I
Yep.
have to attend virtually. So
okay.
thank you.
Okay.
so 6 p.m. next week.
Thanks.
And that's all I have. I just do want to thank our staff, particularly Sarah and Evelyn and Kelly and everybody, the whole finance department for all the hard work. I know I did get a couple questions about the information coming out, yesterday. And I think maybe just to be square, I think our impression was that this was presentation night and then you have your week to look at that. So we were really working on everything right up until, and in fact, we found a glitch, repaired it, and then also really an hour before we hit send, we were able to re-engineer things and drop another % off the recommendation. So had we sent it out earlier, it would have been higher with a mistake in it. So, we are trying to get you your information as complete as you can and available for any questions if anybody wants. I mean, obviously there's public questions, but if people want detailed questions, happy to meet with anybody at any time. And, you've got your night reading now, and you've got your videos to watch. So Friday night, curl up with a budget book and a movie and a police video, and you'd be all set to go. But anyway, I know I don't mean to make light of it. It's a lot of really hard work from people, and thanks to our team and thanks to you all for digging into this. It's going to be a challenging year.
And one final note, I just, on the river gauge, throughout most of the day, the forecast has been peaking at 10.2 feet with an action level of 11 feet. The forecast is now down to 8.9 feet at about 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So things are going in the right direction. And with that, we are adjourned at 9:48 p.m.